What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
Hello, brave souls. I know it's been a while, but I've just been taking a little break. So today's story is called The Frozen Dead. The thermometer outside the gas station read negative 18 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was before the wind chill. I pulled my scarf tighter across my face, leaving only my eyes exposed as I pumped what might be the last tank of gas this side of the Canadian border. My breath crystallized in the air, tiny ice crystals that caught the pale morning light like broken glass. 3 weeks ago, I'd been teaching American literature at SUNY Potsdam, worried about tenure reviews and whether my students actually read the assigned chapters. Now, I was standing in an abandoned Stewart shop in Messina, listening to the wind howl across the frozen St. Lawrence River, trying to decide if the road north to Cornwall was worth the risk. My name is Marcus Webb, and I stayed too long. Everyone knew something was wrong when the hospital in Watertown went dark on Halloween. No one knew it was the beginning of the end. The initial reports were typical media confusion. A drug outbreak, bath salts making people violent, then PCP, then terrorism. By the time the CDC showed up in their moon suits, it had already spread through Jefferson County like wildfire. Except wildfire is the wrong metaphor when the world's ending in a winter that came early and stayed late. This was more like frostbite, creeping, numbing, turning everything dead from the extremities inward. I clicked the pump handle back into place at $42. What would have been the highway robbery back when my money meant something, and climbed into my Ford Explorer. The engine rumbled reassuringly, and I let it idle for a moment, studying the road map spread across my passenger seat. My destination was circled in red Sharpie. Malone, about 30 miles northeast. My brother David lived there with his wife and 2 kids. Lived. Past tense, probably. I hadn't heard from him in 12 days. But I had to know. The radio crackled with static as I twisted the dial, searching for any signal. Most stations had gone silent in a few weeks. A few emergency broadcasts had lasted into week 2, but those had dissolved into chaos. Conflicting evacuation orders, rumors of safe zones that turned out to be slaughterhouses, desperate people screaming for help that wasn't coming. Now there was just the static, and occasionally, something worse. Screaming that didn't sound quite human. I left the radio off and pulled on to Route 37. The highway stretched before me like a frozen grave, buried under 3 feet of snow that the plows would never clear again. I kept to the tracks left by previous vehicles, most days old, judging by the drifts. The Explorer's all-wheel drive bit into the packed snow with a steady crunch that was almost meditative. On both sides of the road, pine trees stood like silent witnesses, their branches heavy with ice. I'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I saw the first body. It was off to the right, partially buried in a snowbank where the road curved. At first, I thought it might be a deer. We had plenty of those, usually causing accidents or eating through everyone's gardens. But as I got closer, I could make out the distinct shape of a human torso. One arm thrust upward through the snow like I was waving for help that had come too late. I kept driving. There was nothing I could do for them. The dead didn't bother me anymore. Not the ones that stayed dead, anyway. I'd seen enough of those in the first days to build up a callus over that particular wound. It was the other ones that troubled my sleep. The ones that got back up despite the cold that should have frozen them solid. They shouldn't have been able to move at all. Not in this weather. That's what the government scientists had said in their final briefings before everything collapsed. The infection, virus, fungus, parasite, whatever the hell it was, should have been neutralized by temperatures below freezing. The host should have become popsicles, easy to avoid or destroy. but the dead don't read scientific papers. Whatever reanimated them seemed to generate its own heat, at least enough to keep the core functioning. I'd seen it myself, steam rising from their mouths in the frigid air, frost forming on their clothes and faces, but never quite freezing them completely. They were slower in the cold. That much was true. But slow didn't mean stopped, and it definitely didn't mean safe. I rounded a bend and slammed on the brakes. 3 cars blocked the road ahead, arranged in a rough barricade. They'd been there for a while. Snow had drifted up to their wheel wells, and ice coated the windows in thick sheets. One was a minivan with a shattered windshield. Another was an overturned pickup truck. The third was a state police cruiser, its driver door hanging open. This was a checkpoint. Or it had been. I put the Explorer in park and sat there for a moment, engine running, trying to decide. I could probably drive around it through the ditch, but the snow depth was uncertain, and the last thing I needed was to get stuck. The alternative was to get out and move something, which meant exposing myself. The wind howled, rattling my vehicle. Snow devils spun across the road like ghostly dancers. I made my decision. Killed the engine, and reached for the rifle in my back seat. The Remington 700 had been my father's deer rifle. I'd inherited it along with his gun cabinet when he died of a heart attack 5 years ago, and I'd barely touched it myself. A few trips at the range to satisfy my brother's insistence that I should keep my skills up. David had been in the military, 2 tours in Iraq, and he never quite understood my preference for books over firearms. I'd never quite understood his need to keep preparing for something terrible. Turned out, he'd been right. I also grabbed my pistol, a Glock 19 that David had given me last Christmas with a lecture about home defense, and made sure I had extra magazines in my coat pockets. Then I pulled on my insulated gloves, wrapped my scarf tighter, and stepped out into the wind. The cold hit me like a physical blow. -18 before wind chill meant it was probably pushing -30 or worse with the gusts coming off the river. Exposed skin would get frostbite in minutes. I moved quickly toward the police cruiser, rifle up, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved except the wind and snow. The cruiser's interior was a disaster. The driver's seat was soaked in dried blood. So much of it that it had pooled on the floor and frozen in a dark red ice slick. The dashboard computer was shattered. Bullet holes stippled the passenger side door from the inside out. Someone had made their last stand here. I'd hoped they'd taken out some of the bastards with them. I checked the trunk. Police cruisers often carried rifles and extra ammunition. It was open, but empty, except for road flares and a first aid kit. Either the cop had taken everything with them, or someone else had already looted it. I grabbed the flares anyway. Fire was life in this weather. A sound made me freeze. It came from behind the overturned pickup truck. A low, wet scraping sound, like someone dragging meat across ice. I raised my rifle and waited. "Hello?" My voice sounded strange in the cold, muffled and distant. The scraping stopped. I waited 10 heartbeats, then 20. My fingers were already starting to ache in the cold despite the gloves. I couldn't stand out here much longer. "If you're alive, I'm not here to hurt you," I called out. "If you need help." The thing that came around the pickup truck wasn't alive, and it definitely didn't need help. It had been a man once, maybe 40 years old, wearing a torn and bloody Parks Department uniform. One of his arms was gone, ripped off at the shoulder, and his face was a ruin of frozen gore. But his eyes, God, his eyes were the worst part. They fixed on me with an intensity that was almost intelligent, almost aware. And then his mouth opened in a soundless howl that showed broken teeth and a blackened tongue. I shot him in the head from 20 feet away. The rifle's report echoed across the frozen landscape like thunder. The dead man, the thing, crumpled into the snow, finally still. Dark fluid leaked from the wound in its skull, steaming in the cold air. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the cold and adrenaline. I'd killed 7 of them in the past 3 weeks. It didn't get easier, but it didn't get harder either. You just did it and moved on, or you became one of them. I checked the other vehicles quickly, rifle at the ready, but found no other threats. The minivan was empty except for abandoned luggage and a child's car seat that I tried not to look at too closely. I returned to the Explorer, started the engine, and carefully maneuvered around the barricade through the ditch. The tires spun once, twice, then caught, and I was back on the road. My hands had gone numb. I cranked the heat and held them in front of the vents, waiting for the painful prickling that meant feeling was returning. Outside, the body of the Parks Department worker lay in the snow. Just another frozen corpse on a highway full of them. 3 miles later, I saw smoke. It was rising from somewhere ahead and to the right, a dark smudge against the white sky. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant survivors. Maybe. Or it meant a trap. I slowed down, studying the terrain. The smoke was coming from what looked like a farmhouse set back from the road, maybe a quarter mile up a private drive. The drive had been plowed recently, within the past day or two, judging by the snow accumulation. Vehicle tracks led up to the house. Someone was definitely there. I pulled over and cut the engine again, considering my options. I had enough supplies to reach him alone without stopping. Food, water, fuel. The smart move was to keep driving. Every stop was a risk. Every interaction with other survivors a potential disaster. I'd learned that the hard way in Potsdam, when a group of my fellow faculty members had decided that my stockpile of food meant they had a right to it, and my protests meant I was selfish. I still had the scar on my shoulder from where Professor Richardson stabbed me with a kitchen knife. But smoke also meant warmth. It meant I could stop for an hour, let the cold leach out of my bones, maybe even boil some water for coffee. And if they had news, any information about the road ahead. The wind gusted, rocking the Explorer on its suspension. The temperature gauge on my dashboard read -22. It was dropping as the sun climbed higher. A paradox of deep winter in northern New York. Sometimes the clearest days were the coldest. I made my decision and started the engine, turning carefully onto the private drive. The farmhouse was old, probably built in the 1950s. A white 2-story with green shutters and a wraparound porch. Smoke poured from the chimney, and I could see lights in the windows, either candles or a generator. A barn stood behind the house, its red paint faded and peeling. 2 vehicles were parked in the clearing ahead and front, a Ford F-250 and a Subaru Outback, both dusted with recent snow. I stopped about 50 feet from the house, in clear view of the windows, and waited. Within 30 seconds, the front door opened. A woman stepped out on the porch, holding a shotgun. She was bundled in a heavy coat and wore a bright red knit cap that seemed almost obscenely cheerful against the gray landscape. Even from this distance, I could see she was my age, maybe late 30s, with dark skin and an expression that said she'd shot her fair share of dead things. I rolled down my window an inch and called out, "I'm not infected! Just passing through and saw your smoke." She didn't lower the shotgun. "Where are you headed?" "Malone. Looking for family." "You alone?" "Yeah." She studied me for a long moment, then turned her head and said something to someone inside the house. A man emerged, tall, older, with a gray beard and a hunting rifle. He looked me over with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent time in the military. The woman called out again. "You can come up, but keep your hands where I can see them. Any sudden moves and Tom here will put a bullet through your windshield. He doesn't miss." I believed her. I shut off the engine and stepped out slowly, hands raised to shoulder height. My rifle stayed in the vehicle. The Glock was under my coat, but I wasn't about to reach for it. As I crunched through the snow toward the porch, I got a better look at them. The woman was younger than I'd first thought, maybe 35, with tired eyes and a confident grip on her weapon. The man, Tom, was in his 60s, silver-haired and weathered, with a kind of stillness that came from being comfortable with violence. "I'm Marcus," I said when I reached the porch step. "Marcus Webb. I taught at SUNY Potsdam before everything went to hell." "Professor?" The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "English?" "American Lit. You?" "Nurse. Canton Potsdam Hospital. Before..." She gestured vaguely at the world. "Vanessa Pierce. This is Tom Whitaker. He owned this place." Tom nodded but didn't lower his rifle. "You said you're going to Boulogne?" "My brother lives there. David Webb. Or lived there. I haven't heard from him since this started." Something flickered across Tom's face. Not quite pity, but close. "Malone got hit hard, son. Real hard. We've had some folks come through that direction. The stories weren't good." My chest tightened. "When?" "About a week ago. Group of 4, heading south. They said the town was overrun. That the emergency shelter at the high school had collapsed. People tried to flee into Canada, but the border is completely locked down. Not even military can get through. They shoot on sight." I'd known it was bad. I'd known my brother was probably dead. But knowing and hearing confirmation were different things. I felt something hollow open up in my chest. Vanessa saw my expression, and her voice softened. "Come inside. You look frozen. We've got coffee and a wood stove. You can warm up before you decide to do what's next." I should have kept driving. I should have thanked them and gotten back to my Explorer and pushed to Malone, to see for myself, to find David's house and know for certain. But the cold had seeped into my bones, and the thought of hot coffee was almost painfully appealing. And besides, I was so damn tired of being alone. "Thank you," I said. Tom finally lowered his rifle and stepped aside to let me enter. The interior of the farmhouse was warm, almost shockingly so after the brutal cold outside. A massive cast-iron wood stove dominated the living room, radiating heat. Candles burned on every surface, throwing dancing shadows on the walls. I saw signs of other occupants, sleeping bags rolled up in the corners, a pile of boots and coats by the door, supplies stacked neatly on the bookshelves that had been cleared of books. "How many of you are here?" I asked, unwrapping my scarf. 6, Vanessa said, setting her shotgun by the door but keeping it within reach. "Tom, me, and 4 others. Sarah and her son Jake are upstairs sleeping. They were on watch last night. Mike's in the barn checking the generator." Tom moved to the wood stove and picked up a battered metal coffee pot. "We've got a decent setup here. Tom's property runs 100 acres, mostly wooded. Good sight lines, only one road in. We've got a well, the wood stove, and Mike got the generator working so we can run a few lights and charge batteries." "You planning on staying long term?" I asked, accepting a cup of coffee that was almost black enough to stand a spoon. Vanessa and Tom exchanged a glance. Tom answered, "For the winter, at least. Maybe longer, if we can get through to the spring. The cold it's keeping them slower, but it's also killing anyone who tries to move around too much. We lost 2 people in the first week, both to exposure. Went out for a supply run and got caught in a storm." I sipped the coffee. It was terrible and wonderful at the same time. "Any idea what's happening on a larger scale? Government response, military, anything?" Vanessa shook her head. "The last news we heard was nearly 2 weeks ago. Someone with a ham radio picked up a broadcast from Fort Drum. The base was still operational then. Said they were working on some kind of solution. But we haven't heard anything since. Either they went dark or..." She didn't need to finish. "Or they're all dead," I said. "Yeah." We sat in silence for a moment, listening to the wood crackle in the stove and the wind howl outside. Then Vanessa asked, "So, what's your plan? If Malone is as bad as they've heard, are you still going?" I thought about David, about Jessica, his wife. with her infectious laugh and terrible cooking. About Emma and Liam, my niece and nephew, 8 and 5 years old, who called me Uncle Mark and thought I was the coolest person alive because I could quote every line from their favorite movies. I have to, I said. I have to know. Tom nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting that answer. Then take my advice. Don't go in through town. Loop around to the north. Come in through the residential area. The main roads will be clogged with abandoned cars and dead things. And for God's sake, don't go near the high school or the hospital. That's where they congregate. They congregate? That was new information. I thought they just wandered. Mostly they do, Vanessa said. But we've seen them gathering in certain places. Buildings with lots of bodies, usually. Places where people tried to shelter. It's like they were drawn to where the dying happened. Or maybe they're just stupid and get trapped in enclosed spaces. Either way, those places are death traps. The front door opened with a blast of cold air, and a man entered, stomping snow from his boots. He was my age, stocky and bearded, wearing a grease-stained Carhartt jacket. He looked at me with surprise, then suspicion. "Who's this?" "Marcus Webb," I said. "Just passing through." "Mike Dalton," he replied, though he didn't offer his hand. His eyes stayed weary. "Where from?" "Potsdam. Heading to Malone." "Jesus, why?" "Family." That single word seemed to soften something in his expression. He nodded and moved toward the wood stove, holding his hands out to warm them. "Generator's running fine. We've got another week of propane, maybe 2 if we're careful." We talked for the next hour. About supplies, about the infection, about the desperate calculus of survival in a world that had frozen over and died. I learned that Vanessa had been caught at the hospital when the outbreak started, and watched her coworkers turn one by one until she'd fled with nothing but her scrubs and a scalpel. Tom had been a Vietnam vet who'd spent the last 20 years of his life preparing for some vague apocalypse, never really believing it would come. Mike had been a mechanic in Messina, with a wife and daughter who hadn't made it out of their apartment building. Everyone had lost someone. Everyone had a story about the moment they realized the world was ending. I told them about Potsdam, about the university's attempt to quarantine the campus, about how it had fallen apart when the food ran low and people got desperate, about Professor Richardson and the kitchen knife, about the night I'd killed my first infected, a grad student named Amy Chen, who had shared coffee with 100 times in the faculty lounge, who'd taught me about classical Chinese poetry, who'd come at me with bloody hands and dead eyes. "The worst part is that they're so slow in this cold," Vanessa said quietly. "You can see them coming. You have time to think about who they used to be before you pull the trigger." "Yeah," I agreed. "That is the worst part." Outside, the light was starting to fade. The days were short this far north in December, barely 7 hours of sunlight, and that was on a clear day. I glanced at my watch. 3:30 p.m. I needed to make a decision. "I should get moving," I said, standing. "I want to reach Malone before dark." Tom stood as well. "Hold on a minute." He disappeared into another room and returned with a handheld radio. "VHF, Channel 7. We keep a watch on it. If you run into trouble, give us a call. We might not be able to help, but at least someone will know." I took the radio, touched by the gesture. "Thank you. For the coffee, for the information, everything." "Stay alive, Marcus," Vanessa said. "If you find your family, if they're still okay, come back this way. We could use more people." "And if they're not?" I asked. "Then come back anyway. Nobody should be alone out there." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and pulled my scarf back into place. The cold slapped me as soon as I stepped outside, shocking after the warmth of the house. I made my way to the Explorer, feeling Tom and Vanessa watching from the porch. The engine started on the first try, and I gave them a final wave before heading down to the drive. In my rearview mirror, I saw them standing together, dark figures against the lit windows of the farmhouse. Then I turned onto the highway, and they disappeared from view. The last 20 miles to Malone took me an hour. The road conditions deteriorated as I went north. The tracks I'd been following petering out until I was plowing through virgin snow, hoping I was still on the highway and not about to drive into a ditch. The sun set in a blaze of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if I hadn't meant I was about to be driving into the dark, in sub-zero temperatures, toward a town that might be full of the infected. I saw them before I reached the town proper. They stood along the roadside like frozen statues, covered in snow and ice, so still that I almost mistook them for trees at first. But as my headlights swept across them, I could see the human shapes, the torn clothing, the dark stains in the snow at their feet. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all facing the same direction, toward the center of town. They didn't move as I drove past. The cold had slowed them to near immobility, but I could see steam rising from some of them, that impossible heat that kept them animated. Come nightfall, when the temperature dropped even further, they might stop moving entirely. Or they might not. The rules seemed to change day by day. I followed Tom's advice and looped north, avoiding the main street. The residential area was dark and dead, buried under snow. Cars sat frozen in driveways. Christmas lights still hung from a few porches, unlit, remnants of holiday that would have never come. Every house could have been full of bodies, or full of infected, or full of survivors hiding in the dark. There was no way to know. David's house is on Elm Street, a modest ranch with a 2-car garage and a swing set in the backyard. I'd visited last summer for Emma's birthday, had helped David grill hamburgers while Jessica organized a treasure hunt for the kids. It had been hot and loud and chaotic and perfect. Now it was dark and silent, half buried in snow. I parked in the driveway, leaving the engine running. The house showed no lights, no signs of life. The front door was closed. No broken windows. That was something, at least. It didn't look like it had been breached. I took the Glock in one hand and a flashlight in the other, and stepped out into the frigid night. The cold was unbearable now, probably pushing -40 with the wind chill. My exposed skin burned. I had maybe 5 minutes before the frostbite became a real danger. I hurried to the front door and tried the handle. Locked. I knocked hard. "Jessica! David! It's Marcus! Are you in there?" Nothing. I knocked again, shouting louder, but the house remained dark and silent. I moved around to the back, trying to peer through windows, but the interior is pitch black. I tried the back door, also locked. The garage door, same. They had a spare key. David had told me about it, made a joke about it. Where was it? Under a flower pot or a fake rock or... No, it was magnetic, attached to the underside of the porch railing. I found it on the third try. My fingers were so numb I could barely feel a small metal box. I got the front door open and stepped inside, flashlight sweeping the darkness. "David! It's Marcus! I'm coming in!" The house was cold. Not as cold as outside, but cold enough that I could see my breath. That meant the heat had been off for days, maybe weeks. My flashlight beam picked out familiar details. Family photos on the walls. Emma's backpack by the door. A row of winter coats on hooks. The living room was untouched. So was the kitchen. No signs of struggle, no blood, no bodies. That was good, I told myself. That was good. I checked the bedrooms one by one. David and Jessica's room, empty. Bed neatly made. Emma's room, empty. Stuffed animals arranged on the pillow. Liam's room, empty. Toy dinosaurs frozen in some eternal battle on the floor. The basement. I stood at the top of the basement stairs for a full minute, trying to make myself descend. The flashlight beam showed wooden steps leading down into darkness. Nothing moved in that darkness. No sounds came from below. But I had to know. I went down slowly, Glock raised, flashlight attached to the barrel. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor and exposed beams. Storage boxes were stacked against the walls. An old couch sat in one corner. And there, in the far corner, a note pinned to a support beam with a kitchen knife. I crossed the basement and pulled it free with shaking hands. The handwriting was David's, hasty but legible. Mark, if you're reading this, you made it further than most. We tried to wait, but Emma got sick and the shelter at the high school was our only option. This was November 4th. I don't know if we'll make it. The radio says they're evacuating people north, but I don't believe it anymore. I should have listened to you about staying put. Should have planned better. I'm sorry. If we don't make it, tell Mom and Dad we tried. Tell them we love them. Your brother, David. I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. The high school. But Tom and Vanessa had warned me about the high school. David had taken his family there anyway, because his daughter was sick and he was desperate, and that's what parents do. I stood in that cold basement for a long time. Long enough that my fingers started to lose feeling again. Then I went back upstairs, locked the door behind me, and returned to the Explorer. The engine was still running. The fuel gauge showed 3/4 full. I had food, water, ammunition. I had a map and a radio. I had Tom's advice ringing in my ears. Don't go near the high school. I put the Explorer in gear and headed toward the center of town. The high school was a sprawling complex on the north side of Malone, built in the 70s and expanded twice since then. It had a capacity of about 800 students. God only knew how many people had tried to shelter there when everything collapsed. I saw the smoke before I saw the building. Not the clean wood smoke of a warming fire, but the thick black smoke of something chemical burning. And I saw them. Hundreds of infected, maybe thousands, surrounding the school in a loose perimeter. They stood motionless in the snow, frozen in place by the brutal cold, but their eyes tracked by headlights as I approached. The main entrance had been barricaded at some point, cars and furniture piled against the doors, but the barricade had been breached. The doors hung open, and from inside I could see the flicker of flames. Someone had set fire to the school. I stopped the Explorer about 100 yards away and sat there, engine idling, trying to think. The infected were slow in this cold. I might be able to get inside, search for David and his family, and get out. Might. Or I might get trapped in a burning building full of the dead, which seemed like a particularly horrible way to die. The smart thing to do was drive away. David's note had been dated November 4th. Today was November 28th. Nearly a month had passed. If they'd been in the school when it fell, they were gone. Finding their bodies wouldn't change that. Going in there would just add mine to the count. But they were my family. David was my brother. Emma and Liam were... A figure emerged from the school's main entrance. It was human shape but moving wrong, jerky and uncoordinated. The firelight behind it threw its shadow long across the snow. As I watched, it was followed by another figure, then another. They spilled out of the burning building like ants from a disturbed nest, drawn by my headlights or my engine or just the promise of something alive in this frozen dead world. I counted 12, 2 dozen, more still coming. I put the Explorer in reverse and backed away slowly. The infected followed, their pace agonizingly slow in the extreme cold but relentless. I could outrun them easily, but more were emerging from the school, and others were still stirring in the surrounding area, drawn by the movement. A hand slammed against my window, making me jump. One of them had gotten closer than I'd realized. A woman in a torn postal service uniform, her face a mask of frost and gore. She clawed at the window, her frozen fingers making a horrible scraping sound. I accelerated backwards, and she fell away, disappearing under the snow. I didn't stop to see if she got up. By the time I reached the town's edge, I had a convoy of at least 50 infected trailing behind, their forms dark against the burning school. I turned onto the highway and floored it, leaving them behind in the darkness. I drove south for an hour before I pulled over, hands shaking too badly to continue. The tears I'd been holding back finally came. freezing on my cheeks almost instantly. I wiped them away roughly and stared at the road ahead. David was gone. Jessica was gone. Emma and Liam were gone. My family was gone. I was alone. The radio Tom had given me cracked to life, making me jump. Marcus, this is Tom. You out there? Over. I grabbed the radio with numb fingers. I'm here. Over. You found what you were looking for? Over. I thought about lying, but what was the point? No. They're gone. Over. A long pause, then. I'm sorry, son. You coming back this way? Over. I looked at the road ahead, disappearing into the darkness and snow. I thought about that warm farmhouse, about Vanessa and Tom and Mike and the others, about Vanessa's words. Nobody should be alone out there. Yeah, I said into the radio. Yeah, I am. Be there in about 40 minutes. Over. We'll leave the light on. Tom out. I started the engine and turned the Explorer around. Behind me, Malone burned. Ahead of me, somewhere in the darkness, was a farmhouse full of strangers who might become something more. It wasn't much of a future, but it was the only one I had. The frozen dead would still be there tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. But tonight, I would sit by a warm fire and drink terrible coffee and not be alone. Tomorrow I would figure out how to survive this winter. And maybe, just maybe, I'd figure out how to live. Hello, brave souls. Today we've got part 2 of The Frozen Dead. Hope you guys enjoy it. I woke to the sound of someone screaming. For a moment, I was disoriented, lost in that space between sleep and waking where nothing makes sense. Then I remembered. The farmhouse, the wood stove, the sleeping bag I'd been given on the floor of Tom's living room. I'd been here for 3 days, falling into an exhausted routine of watches, chores, and trying not to think about the burning school of Malone. The scream came again, high-pitched, terrified, from somewhere upstairs. I was on my feet with my Glock in hand before I fully registered what was going on. Others were moving too. Mike emerging from the kitchen, Tom coming down the stairs with his rifle, Vanessa right behind him. The early morning light filtering through the windows was gray and weak. That's Jake, Vanessa said, her voice tight. Sarah's son. We took the stairs fast. Jake was 12 years old, small for his age, with his mother's red hair and a tendency toward nightmares. He'd barely spoken since I'd arrived, spending most of his time reading comic books in corners and avoiding eye contact. His mother, Sarah, had told me he'd watched his father die in the first week, watched him turn and had to be dragged away while his dad clawed at the door of the bathroom they locked him in. The kid had earned his nightmares. Sarah was already in Jake's room, sitting on his bed with her arms around him. He was sobbing into her shoulder, his whole body shaking. She looked up as we crowded the doorway, her expression fierce and protective. He's fine, she said. Just a bad dream. We're fine. But Tom looked past her, at the window. Sarah, get him downstairs, now. She followed his gaze and went pale. I moved to see what they were looking at. The field behind the house, which had been empty yesterday, was now full of the infected. There were at least 100 of them, maybe more, standing motionless in the snow. They'd arrived during the night, drawn by something, our smoke, our noise, our presence. In the pre-dawn cold, they were frozen nearly solid, locked in place like grotesque statues. But the sun was rising, and as the temperature climbed from -30 to -20, then -10, they would thaw enough to move. And they were between us and the barn, between us and the generator, between us and half our supplies. Jesus Christ, Mike whispered. Tom's face was grim. Everyone downstairs. We need to talk. We gathered in the living room, the wood stove throwing heat that suddenly felt inadequate against what was waiting outside. Tom pulled out a hand-drawn map of his property and spread it on the coffee table. Okay, he said, his voice steady despite the situation. Here's what we know. We've got at least 100 of them in the backyard. Could be more in the woods. We can't see far enough to tell. They're mostly frozen, but by midday, they'll be mobile. Why now? Sarah asked. Jake pressed against her side. We've been here for weeks without this many showing up. Vanessa answered. Marcus came from Malone. It's possible some of them followed his vehicle, got close enough to pick up on our scent to see our lights. Or maybe they're migrating, looking for prey. We don't really understand their behavior patterns yet. Doesn't matter why, Mike said. Matters what we do about it. Tom nodded. Agreed. We have several options. None of them great. 1. We stay put, keep quiet, hope they wander off. 2. We try to eliminate them while they're frozen. 3. We abandon the property and head south. Abandon? Sarah's voice rose. Tom, this is the only secure place we found. The only place with heat and food and... I know, Tom said quietly. But if we're surrounded, security doesn't mean much. I studied the map, thinking. How many rounds do we have, total? Mike answered without hesitation. He'd been managing our ammunition inventory. Maybe 800 rounds, various calibers. Tom's .308, my hunting rifle, the shotgun, pistols. Enough for a fight, but not enough to take on 100 of them without running dry. And if we run dry out here, we're dead, Vanessa added. No resupply, no backup. What about fire? I asked. You said you had road flares in the cruiser. We could... Tom shook his head. Not enough accelerant, and the snow's too deep. Anything we set on fire would just melt itself into a pit. Plus, the wind today is supposed to pick up. Last thing we need to do is burn down our own shelter. We sat in silence for a moment, each of us running through impossible calculations. Then Jake spoke up, his voice small but clear. What about the barn? We all looked at him. He shrank back slightly but continued. He said they're between us and the barn. But the barn has that loft door, the one that faces the house. Could we get to the barn somehow and shoot them from up there? They can't climb, right? Tom stared at the kid, then at the map. Son of a bitch, the kid's right. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Tom pointed to his map. The barn loft has a clear field of view over the entire back field. It's an elevated position, protected from wind, and the infected can't reach us up there. We'd have to get to the barn first, but once we're inside, we could just pick them off one by one, I finished. Take our time, make every shot count. But how do we get to the barn? Vanessa asked. They're all through the field. I thought about it, about the cold and what it did to the infected, about everything I'd learned in 3 weeks of running and hiding and surviving. We go now, right now, while they're still mostly frozen. We move fast, we don't engage unless we have to, and we get inside before they react. Mike was already shaking his head. That's insane, man. If even one of them is mobile enough to grab you, then we shoot it and keep moving, I said. Look, in an hour they'll be fully thawed and mobile. Our window is right now, but we still have an advantage. Tom studied me for a long moment. You've thought about this before. I've had to move through them before. In Potsdam, when I left my apartment. The cold slows them, but it doesn't stop them unless it's below -20. Right now it's probably -25, maybe colder. They'll be sluggish, but not completely frozen. We can do this. We? Vanessa said. Marcus, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I met her eyes. You took me in. You gave me a place where I had nothing. This is my fight too. Sarah looked between us. Someone needs to stay with Jake. He can't. I can help, Jake said, his voice stronger now. I can load magazines. I can watch the doors. Something. I'm not useless. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Okay. Tom stood. All right, Marcus, Mike, and I will make the run to the barn. Vanessa, Sarah, and Jake stay here and cover us from the windows. If things go sideways, if we don't make it, you three take the Explorer and head south to Canton. There's supposed to be a FEMA shelter there. Don't wait for us. Don't try to be heroes. Just go. Understood? Vanessa looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded. Understood. We spent the next 10 minutes preparing. I dressed in layers, knowing that the sprint to the barn would warm me up, but the wait afterward would freeze me solid if I wasn't careful. I checked my Glock, made sure I had extra magazines in my pockets. Tom packed the rifle and ammunition into 2 duffel bags while Mike loaded the shotgun with slugs. Better penetration than buckshot against frozen flesh and bone. Through the windows, I could see the infected more clearly now. The rising sun illuminated them in terrible detail. Men, women, a few that might have been teenagers, all frozen in various poses, reaching, walking, crawling. Their clothes were torn and stained. Frost covered their exposed skin. Some had visible wounds, bite marks, chunks of flesh missing. Others looked almost intact except for their eyes, which even at this distance seemed to track the movement in the house. They know we're here, I said quietly. Yeah, Tom agreed. They know. We gathered at the back door. Tom would go first with his rifle. I'd be in the middle with the duffel bags, and Mike would bring up the rear with the shotgun. Sarah was positioned at the upstairs window with Tom's hunting rifle. Vanessa had the other shotgun downstairs. Jake sat at the kitchen table, magazines and boxes of ammunition spread before him, ready to reload anything we needed. On 3, Tom said, his hand on the doorknob. 1, 2, 3. We exploded out into the cold. The temperature hit me like a wall, but I pushed through it, my boots crunching in the snow as I ran. The barn may be 70 yards away, not far under normal circumstances, but with 50 pounds of gear and a field of frozen infected between us and safety, it felt like miles. The infected reacted immediately. Their heads turned toward us, tracking our movement. The closest ones tried to move, but the cold had locked their joints. They managed only slow, jerky movements, like rusted machinery trying to start. We were 20 yards out when one of them broke free. It had been a large man, over 6 feet tall, wearing the remains of a hunting jacket. Whatever warmth remained at his core must have been enough to fight through the cold because it lunged toward us with surprising speed. Tom put it down with a single shot to the head, the report echoing across the field. The gunshot had an effect. All across the field, the infected began trying harder to move, struggling against the cold that held them. Some managed to break free, ice cracking off their clothes and skin. Go, go! Mike shouted. We ran. Behind us, more shots rang out. Vanessa and Sarah providing cover fire from the house. I saw one infected drop, then another, but more were breaking free, shambling toward us through the deep snow. 40 yards, 30 yards. I could see the barn door now, old and red and wonderful. 20 yards. Something grabbed my ankle. I went down hard, the duffel bags flying from my hands. One of the infected had been lying prone in the snow, buried deep enough that I'd run right past it. Now it had me, and its frozen fingers locked around my ankle with terrible strength. I could see its face. A woman, maybe 30, with blonde hair frozen in its icicles and milky dead eyes. Her mouth opened, showing broken teeth, and she pulled herself up my leg toward my throat. I kicked at her head with my free foot, but the angle was wrong. She kept coming, hand over hand, impossibly strong. I fumbled for my Glock, but couldn't reach it with her weight pinning me down. Then Mike was there, and the shotgun roared. The woman's head disappeared in a spray of frozen gore. Her grip relaxed, and I scrambled backward, gasping. Move! Mike hauled me to my feet. I grabbed one of the duffel bags, couldn't reach the other, and we ran the final 20 yards. Tom had the barn door open, and we tumbled through into the blessed darkness inside. He slammed it shut behind us and threw the bolt. Something hit the door hard enough to shake it in its frame. Then another impact. Then a dozen more. Outside, the infected had reached the barn and were throwing themselves against it. The loft! Tom gasped. Get to the loft! We climbed to the ladder to the second floor, pulling the bags up behind us. The loft was filled with hay bales and old farm equipment, but it also had a large opening that faced the house. The door Jake had mentioned, used for loading hay into the loft from a truck below. Tom pushed it open, and cold air flooded in along with morning light. The field below was a nightmare. At least 80 infected were now mobile, shambling through the snow toward either the barn or the house. More was still breaking free from the grip of the cold. They moved slowly, almost comically so, but there were so many of them. "Start shooting," Tom said, settling into position. "Aimed fire. Make every round count." I laid out magazines in a neat row, took a prone position next to Tom, and looked through my rifle scope. An infected man in a torn business suit filled my view, his face a ruin of frostbite and decay. I put my crosshairs on his forehead and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against my shoulder. The man dropped. Next to me, Tom fired. Another one down. Mike was loading his hunting rifle, taking his time with each shot. We settled into a rhythm. Identify target. Aim. Fire. Reload. The infected kept coming, drawn by the noise and movement, and we kept shooting. Some dropped immediately. Others took multiple hits before they stopped moving. None of them ran. None of them showed fear or self-preservation. They just came on and on and on. My shoulders started to ache from the recoil. My ears rang despite the cold. The pile of brass casings at my feet grew steadily. Below us, the infected clawed at the barn walls, but the old wood held. A few tried to push through the lower door, but Tom had barricaded with a tractor before he'd arrived. "How many have we dropped?" Mike asked, his voice hoarse. I did a quick count of the bodies visible in the snow. Maybe 40, maybe 50. "How many rounds have we fired?" I looked at my empty magazines. "Too many." Tom swore softly. "We need to be more selective. Headshots only. Don't waste ammunition on body hits. And for God's sakes, make sure they're actually down before moving on to the next one." We adjusted our strategy. The shooting slowed, but became more efficient. I watched through my scope as an infected woman struggled toward the house, waited until she was clear of the others, fired once. She dropped and didn't move. Moved to the next target. The sun climbed higher. The temperature rose, still well below zero, but warm enough that the infected moved more easily. They were streaming out of the woods now, drawn by the sound of gunfire. For every one we dropped, 2 more seemed to appear. "This isn't working," Mike said. "It's too many." He was right. We'd made a dent, but the sheer numbers were overwhelming, and our ammunition was running low. I was down to 3 magazines. Tom had 4. Mike had about 20 rounds left from his hunting rifle. Then I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A mechanical rumble coming from the south. "You hear that?" I said. Tom cocked his head. "Sounds like an engine. A big one." We all moved to the loft door, looking south toward the road. Through the trees, I caught a flash of movement. Then it emerged into the clearing, a massive yellow snowplow, county highway stamped on its side, pushing through the snow at surprising speed, and sitting in the cab. "Is that a woman?" Mike said. It was. I could see her clearly now through the snowplow's windshield. A black woman with short gray hair, wearing what looked like a highway department coat. She was heading straight toward the house, and she was going at least 30 miles an hour. "What the hell is she doing?" Tom wondered. We were about to find out. The snowplow plowed, literally, into the cluster of infected near the house. Bodies flew through the air or disappeared under the massive blade. The woman didn't slow down. She carved through them like they were nothing, the plow's blade throwing infected aside like snow. She made a wide loop around the property, smashing through groups of infected, crushing them under the plow's wheels. It was the most violent, efficient, and frankly insane thing I'd ever seen since this all started. After her third pass, she pulled the plow up to the house and laid on the horn. 3 long blasts. Vanessa appeared at the upstairs window, looking as shocked as we were. The woman in the plow cab rolled down her window and shouted something we couldn't hear from the barn. "Cover me," I said to Mike and Tom. "I'm going to the house." "Marcus," Tom started. "She just saved our asses. Least I can do is say thank you." I climbed down from the loft and unbolted the barn door. A few infected were nearby, but the cold had slowed them again, and I was able to slip past. I ran to the house, keeping low. Vanessa had the back door open. "Who is she?" Vanessa asked as I came inside. "No idea, but she's either the craziest person I've ever seen or the best friend we're going to have." The woman had climbed down from the plow and was standing by the front door. Up close, I could see she was in her 60s, with laugh lines around her eyes and a competent grip on the pistol she carried. She smiled when she saw us. "Name's Gloria Henderson," she said. "I worked for Jefferson County Highway Department for 35 years. Figured the county didn't need this plow anymore, so I borrowed it." She looked at the field full of bodies and the infected still struggling through the snow. "Looks like you folks could use a hand." Gloria's arrival changed everything. Over the next hour, she made methodical passes through the field with the snowplow, crushing or scattering the infected. The ones that remained were sluggish enough that Tom, Mike, and I could pick them off from the barn loft. By noon, the field was clear except for dozens of bodies and a lot of churned, bloody snow. We gathered in the house, all of us now, including Gloria, and I got my first good look at our savior. She was shorter than I expected, maybe 5'4", with a stocky build and hands that looked like they'd spent decades gripping steering wheels and tools. Her hair was completely gray, cut short and practical. She wore insulated Carhartt overalls over a fleece jacket and steel-toed boots that had seen better days. "So," she said, accepting a cup of coffee from Vanessa. "You folks been here long?" Tom explained our situation. The farmhouse, the supplies, the plan to survive winter. Gloria listened, nodding occasionally, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Good setup," she said when we finished. "Better than most. I've been driving around for the past week, checking on people, seeing who's left. Slim pickings, I'm afraid. Most folks either turned or ran south when it got bad." "Where are you staying?" Sarah asked. "Highway Department garage in Canton. It's secure, got fuel for the plow, and there's a break room with a space heater and a couch. Been making runs up and down Route 11, clearing roads, helping where I can." She took a sip of coffee. "Found 3 other groups up of survivors so far, all of them fortified in place, trying to wait out the winter." "How many total?" I asked. "Maybe 40 people, all told. Used to be more." Her expression darkened. "Lost a group of 12 in Governor last week. They had a good position in the old bank building, but they got careless. One of them turned inside the perimeter, and it spread fast. By the time I heard about it, there was nothing left but bodies." We sat in silence, absorbing that. 12 people, gone in a matter of hours. It could have been us. "The infected," Mike said. "Where are they all coming from? We've killed hundreds. They're always coming." Gloria set down her coffee cup. "Best I can figure, they're migrating. The cold is pushing them south and east, looking for any remaining warm bodies. Every population center, Watertown, Messina, Ogdensburg, even little places like Potsdam, had thousands of people when this started. Now those thousands are wandering around, looking for food. And we're food." "What about the government?" Vanessa asked. "The military, the CDC, anyone in charge?" "Fort Drum went dark 2 weeks ago," Gloria said flatly. "I tried to reach them on the radio. Nothing. Either they're gone or they're sealed themselves off completely, and I haven't heard any government broadcasts in 10 days. Far as I can tell, we're on our own." "What about Canada?" Tom asked. "The border is only 20 miles north." Gloria shook her head. "Locked down tight. I drove up to Cornwall Bridge. They've got military on the other side with orders to shoot anyone who tries to cross. Americans, Canadians, doesn't matter. They're not letting anyone in." Jake, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, spoke up. So we're trapped. Gloria looked at him with surprising gentleness. Yes, son, we are. But being trapped doesn't mean being helpless. It means we adapt, we survive, and we look out for each other. That's all we can do. I thought about Malone, about David and his family, about all the ways this could have gone differently if people had just worked together from the start. You said you found other groups. Could we, I don't know, communicate with them? Coordinate? Already doing it, Gloria said. I've got a CB radio network set up. Every group I find, I give them a radio and a schedule. We do check-ins twice a day. Share information, warn each other about infected movements. It's not much, but it's something. Tom leaned forward. What do you need from us? Same thing I need from everyone. To survive. Keep this position secure. Help when you can. And if you got anyone with useful skills, let me know. We're going to need mechanics, medics, people who can work with their hands. The more we can pool our resources, the better chance we all have. Vanessa raised her hand slightly. I'm a nurse, RN. Got 6 years of experience. Well, thank God for that, Gloria said. We've got 2 people with medical training across all 4 groups, and one of them is a veterinarian. You just became our most valuable asset. I taught literature, I said. Not sure how useful that'll be. Gloria smiled. You'd be surprised. When this is over, if it's ever over, we're going to need people who remembered what civilization looked like. People who can teach kids how to read. People who can tell stories. Who can remind us we're more than just survivors. Don't sell yourself short. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the corpse-strewn field. Here's what I think. We've got maybe 3 months of deep winter left. January and February are going to be brutal. Colder than anything we've seen so far. The infected will slow down. Maybe stop moving entirely if it gets cold enough. That's our window. That's when we need to consolidate, gather supplies, and fortify positions. Come spring, when they thaw out. She didn't need to finish. We all knew what was happening in spring. So we prepare, Tom said. We work together, we stay alive, and we prepare for spring. Exactly. Gloria turned back to us. I'm going to keep making rounds, checking on groups, clearing roads when I can. But I'll stop back here every few days. If you need anything, supplies, information, help, you use that radio I'm going to give you and you call. Someone will answer. We're all in this together now. We spent the rest of the day working. Tom and Mike reinforced the barn doors. Sarah and Jake inventoried our ammunition and supplies. We were lower than comfortable, but not desperate yet. Vanessa organized a medical kit from various supplies scattered around the house, and I helped Gloria get the snowplow ready for her next run. You're not from around here originally, Gloria said as we checked the plow's hydraulics. It was a statement, not a question. Buffalo, I said. Came up here for the teaching job 8 years ago. What made you stay? I thought about it. I don't know. Quiet, maybe. Buffalo was crowded, loud, always moving. Up here, things were slower. I could think. And your family? The brother you mentioned to Tom? My hand stilled in the wrench I was holding. Dead, probably. I found his house in Malone. Found a note said he'd gone to the high school shelter. The school was burning when I got there. Full of infected. I couldn't. Gloria put a hand on my shoulder. You survived. That's what matters. Your brother would want you to survive. He had kids, I said quietly. A boy and a girl. 8 and 5. They called me Uncle Mark. I know. Gloria's voice was gentle. I lost my daughter and her family in Watertown. First week. She was a teacher too, at the middle school. Husband was a cop. They had 3 kids. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't find them. Maybe that's better. Maybe not. I know they're gone. And I know I'm still here. I have to do something with that. So I drive around in a stolen snowplow and try to save whoever's left. It's not much, but it's something. I looked at a 60-something woman who'd taken a county snowplow and turned it into a weapon against the apocalypse. I felt something shift inside me. For 3 weeks, I'd been running, surviving, focused only on the next hour, the next day. I'd lost my family, my home, my purpose. But maybe there was something else. Maybe there was this, helping strangers survive, being part of something larger than my own grief. When you come back, I said, I want to come with you. On your rounds, I can help. Gloria studied me. It's dangerous. Every time I go out, I might not come back. I know, but sitting here waiting for spring, I can't do that. I need something to do. She nodded slowly. All right, next time I come through, you can ride along. But you follow my lead. You do what I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Deal? Deal. We finished with the plow as the sun was setting. Gloria gathered us all together for one final conversation before she left. I'm going to give you this, she said, handing Tom a CB radio. Channel 19. Check-ins are at 0800 and 2000 every day. If you miss a check-in, we'll assume you're in trouble and someone will come looking. If you need immediate help, use the emergency protocol. Repeat Mayday 3 times followed by your location. Tom took the radio like it was precious. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me. This is just the beginning. Things are going to get worse before they get better. If they get better at all. But at least we're not alone anymore. She climbed back into the snowplow, and we watched her drive away, the big yellow machine disappearing into the gathering darkness. When she was gone, we went back inside and gathered on the wood stove. Well, Mike said finally, that was something. She's right, though, Tom said. We need to prepare for spring, which means we need more ammunition, more food, more fuel. We need to expand our capabilities. And we need to connect with those groups, Vanessa added. Pool our resources, share information. We're a lot stronger together. Sarah looked at Jake, then at the rest of us. My son suggested the barn strategy today. He helped save all of us. I think we need to remember that anyone can contribute anything. Even kids, especially kids. They're going to inherit whatever we leave them. Jake flushed but didn't look away. I just wanted to help. You did, I told him. You absolutely did. We talked late into the night, making plans, discussing strategies, trying to see a path through the endless winter. When I finally crawled into my sleeping bag, my mind was full of possibilities. For the first time since this started, I felt something other than grief and fear. I felt hope. Outside, the temperature was dropping toward -30. The wind howled around the farmhouse, rattling windows and driving snow against the walls. Somewhere in the darkness, the infected were freezing into temporary stillness, locked in place until the sun returned and thawed them enough to hunt again. But inside, we were warm. Inside, we were together. Inside, we were making plans to survive. That night, I dreamed of Emma and Liam, but for the first time, it wasn't a nightmare. They were playing in the snow that was clean and white, laughing, and when they saw me, they waved. I waved back, and when I woke up, I could still hear their laughter. It was enough to keep me going. Gloria returned 4 days later. It was late morning, and I was on watch in the upstairs window when I heard the distinctive rumble of the snowplow engine. She emerged from the tree line, the big yellow machine cutting through fresh snow that had fallen overnight. But something was wrong. She was driving faster than usual, and she laid on the horn immediately. 5 short blasts. Our emergency signal. Everyone up! I shouted down the stairs. Gloria's back and she's signaling trouble. We grabbed weapons and ran outside. Gloria was already climbing out of the plow cab, and I could see someone else in there with her. A figure slumped in the passenger seat. Need Vanessa, Gloria shouted. Got wounded. Vanessa was there in seconds, medical kit in hand. Together, we helped the passenger out of the cab. It was a man, maybe 40 years old, with a makeshift bandage wrapped around his left arm. Blood had soaked through the cloth, and his face was gray with pain and shock. "Bite?" Tom asked, his voice hard. His rifle up, pointed to the ground but ready. "No," Gloria said firmly. "Frostbite, severe, and a cut from broken glass. He's not infected." We got him inside and laid him on the couch. Vanessa immediately went to work, cutting away the bandage to reveal the wound underneath. The man's hand was black with frostbite up to the wrist. Above that was a deep laceration that was definitely infected, but with bacteria, not the virus. "What happened?" Vanessa asked as she worked. "His name is Robert," Gloria said. "He was part of the group in Canton, the one holed up in the old firehouse. They got hit last night. Big group of infected, maybe 200. Most of them got out, but Robert got separated, broke through a window trying to escape, fell in a snowbank and couldn't get his hand out for almost an hour. By the time I found him, he'd been wandering for 6 hours in negative 20-degree weather." Robert's eyes were closed, but he was breathing. Vanessa looked up at us, her expression grim. "The frostbite is severe. 3rd degree, maybe 4th. The tissue is dead, and this laceration is badly infected. I can clean it. I can bandage it. But he needs real medical attention. Antibiotics, some sterile conditions, probably surgery." "Where do we get that?" Sarah asked. "We don't," Vanessa said flatly. "Best case scenario, I can keep him alive and he loses the hand. Worst case." She didn't finish. Gloria sank into a chair, looking older than I'd ever seen her. The Canton group is scattered. Some of them made it to other safe houses, but at least 4 are dead and 3 more are missing. We're down to maybe 30 survivors total across all groups now. 30 people in the entire county. The weight of that hung in the air. 30 people, where there used to be tens of thousands. "There's more," Gloria said. "The infected that hit Canton. They were organized, moving in a coordinated group, all converging on the firehouse at once. I've never seen them do that before." "Organized how?" Tom asked, his voice sharp. "They don't think. They don't plan." "I know what they're supposed to do," Gloria interrupted. "I'm telling you what I saw. They came from multiple directions at once, all hitting the building at the same time. Either that's one hell of a coincidence, or something's changing." I thought about the infected at the high school in Malone, all gathered in one place. I'd assumed they'd just gotten trapped there, stupid animals following each other into a pen. But what if it was something else? What if they were learning? "I need to radio the other groups," Tom said. "Warn them. If the infected are getting smarter." "Already did," Gloria said. "Everyone's on high alert. But here's the thing. I don't think we can stay separated anymore. Winter's only going to get colder for another month. But these attacks are escalating. By the time spring comes, if we're still scattered in small groups, we're going to get picked off one by one." "What are you suggesting?" Mike asked. Gloria looked at us each in turn. "I'm suggesting we consolidate. One location, all 30 survivors, all resources pooled. We'd be stronger, better defended, and we'd have more skills to draw on. Vanessa here could actually treat injuries properly if she had a real medical setup. Tom's military experience could help us organize a real defense. Marcus," she looked at me, "you're smart, educated, and you've survived alone longer than most. We need people like you." "Where?" Vanessa asked. "Where could we all go that would be defensible?" "I've been thinking about that," Gloria said. "There's an old resort up near Cranberry Lake. Big main lodge, several small cabins, surrounded by water on 3 sides. It's isolated, which means fewer infected to deal with. It's got fireplaces and a generator system, and it's got a dock. If we can get boats running in the spring, we could fish, maybe even establish a real food source." Tom studied his map, finding the location. "That's 40 miles from here, through infected territory in the middle of winter." "I know," Gloria said, "but if we wait until spring to consolidate, we'll be doing it when the infected are fully mobile again. Right now, in the deep cold, they're slow. We have an advantage. We use it. How do we move 30 people 40 miles? Sarah asked. We don't have enough vehicles, and anyone on foot in this cold. We have the snowplow, Gloria said, and whatever vehicles each group has. We move in a convoy. Plow leads and clears the road. Everyone else follows close. We pick up each group as we go, gather supplies, and head north. 2 days, maybe 3 if weather slows us down. Robert groaned on the couch, and Vanessa moved to check on him. She looked at Gloria. He can't travel like this, not for days. He'll die. Gloria's face was stone. Then he stays here with someone to look after him, and we come back for them after we get the resort secured. Or he comes with us, and maybe he makes it. Maybe he doesn't. Those are the options. The brutal calculation of survival. I'd gotten used to it, but it still turned my stomach. I'll stay with him, Vanessa said quietly. Someone needs to monitor his conditions, manage the infected. If you're going to do this consolidation, you don't need me until you get there. No, Tom's voice said firmly. We need your medical expertise in the convoy. If someone gets injured during the move. Then they got basic first aid from the kit, Vanessa interrupted. Robert needs constant monitoring. His fever is already climbing. If sepsis sets in. She looked at Gloria. You said yourself I'm your most valuable asset. Well, I'm telling you what I need to do my job. I need to stay here and keep this man alive. Mike cleared his throat. I'll stay too. Someone needs to protect her. And I'm a decent shot, but I'm not military like Tom. You need him more than me. I saw something pass between Mike and Vanessa. Not romantic, but a connection formed over weeks of surviving together. He was volunteering to stay behind, possibly forever, to make sure she wasn't alone. That's settled then, Tom said, though his expression showed he didn't like this. Vanessa and Mike stay here with Robert. The rest of us go with Gloria, help gather the other survivors, and secure the resort. Once it's safe, we send the plow back for you 3. And if you don't come back? Mike asked. Then you got supplies for at least 2 months, Gloria said. And that, you make your own call. But we will come back. I don't leave people behind. We spent the rest of the day preparing. Tom, Sarah, Jake, and I would leave with Gloria in the morning. We'd take the Explorer as a backup vehicle, loaded with weapons and supplies. The plan was to hit the nearest survival group in Governor first, about 15 miles south, then work our way back north, gathering people and supplies until we reached the resort. That night, we had something approaching a real meal. Sarah had rationed a frozen venison roast that Tom had in his freezer, and she cooked it over the wood stove with some preserved vegetables. It wasn't much, but it felt almost normal. We sat around the stove, plates balanced on our laps, and for a little while, we weren't survivors in an apocalypse. We were just people sharing a meal. Tell me something, Jake said suddenly. He was looking at me. What was your favorite book? Like of all time? Everyone looked at him, then at me. I thought about it. East of Eden, I said finally. Steinbeck. It's about family, about choice, about the capacity for both good and evil in human nature. There's this idea in it. Time shall. It's Hebrew, means thou mayest. Not thou shalt, or thou shalt not, but thou mayest. You have the power to choose. Choose what? Jake asked. Everything. Who you're going to be, how you're going to act, whether you're going to give it to despair or keep fighting. Even in the worst situations, especially in the worst situations, you still have that choice. The room was quiet. Then Gloria spoke. Time shall. I like that. She raised her coffee cup. To choice. To choosing to survive. To choosing to help each other. To choosing to be more than just scared animals running from monsters. We raised our cups and drank. It was probably the worst coffee I'd ever tasted, and it was perfect. Later, I found Vanessa outside on the porch. She was bundled in a heavy coat, looking at the stars. The sky was clear, and without light pollution, the Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of diamonds. Beautiful, isn't it? she said without looking at me. I used to complain about the light pollution from the hospital. Now I'd give anything to see those lights again. Mike's a good man, I said. He'll keep you safe. I know, she smiled slightly. He's been carrying a torch for weeks, but he's too polite to say anything. Figures it takes the end of the world for me to notice. You could do worse. I have done worse. My ex-husband was a cardiologist who thought nurses were just pretty assistants. She laughed softly. At least Mike knows how to change his own oil and fix things. Useful skills in the apocalypse. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Vanessa said, Marcus, I need you to promise me something. What? If we don't make it, Mike and Robert and me, don't come back for us. I mean it. If something goes wrong here, if we get overrun or Robert turns or whatever, you keep going with the others. You get to that resort and you help build something that lasts. Vanessa, promise me. Her voice was fierce. I've been a nurse for 6 years. I've watched people die. I've helped people die with dignity. And I've learned that sometimes the best things you can do is let go. If our time comes, it comes. But don't throw away your life or anyone else's trying to save us. Promise. I thought about David and his family, about how I'd driven into Malone knowing it was probably futile, how I'd almost gotten myself killed at the high school. She was asking me to not make that mistake again. I promise, I said. She nodded and went back inside. I stayed on the porch a while longer, watching the stars and listening to the wind. Somewhere out in the darkness, the infected were frozen in stillness, waiting for the sun to release them. And somewhere beyond them was a resort we'd never seen, where 30 survivors might have a chance to build something resembling a future. Timshell, I thought. Thou mayest. Tomorrow, I would choose to try. We left at dawn with the temperature reading negative 32 degrees. Gloria led in the snowplow, its blade throwing snow in huge arcs as it cleared the driveway. Tom drove the Explorer with Sarah and Jake, and I rode with Gloria. Through the farmhouse windows, I could see Vanessa and Mike watching us leave. Robert was still on the couch, alive but feverish. They'll be okay, Gloria said, seeing where I was looking. That farmhouse is solid, and Mike knows what he's doing. I wanted to believe her. The drive to Governor took 3 hours. It should have taken 30 minutes, but the snow was deep and the road was littered with abandoned vehicles. Gloria had to stop repeatedly to push cars out of the way with the plow blade. We passed frozen infected standing like statues in the drifts, their faces turned toward the road as if waiting for prey that would never come. The Governor group had taken shelter in an old brick apartment building downtown. 5 survivors, 3 men, 2 women, all looking thin and desperate. They'd been living on canned goods from a nearby grocery store, running a kerosene heater that was nearly out of fuel. When Gloria told them the plan, they didn't even hesitate. Anything's better than this, one of the women said. Her name was Patricia, maybe 50 years old, wearing 3 coats and fingerless gloves. We've been listening to you on the radio, hoping someone would come. We loaded them into the convoy. 2 of them squeezed into the Explorer, 3 in the cab of the pickup truck they'd been kept running. Then we headed north toward Potsdam, where the next group was supposed to be. I knew Potsdam. I'd lived there for 8 years, taught classes there, had my apartment there. Seeing it now was like looking at a corpse of someone you used to love. The town was dead. Snow had drifted over the main street, covering abandoned cars and storefronts with broken windows. The university campus was visible on the hill, dark, silent, like a mausoleum. I thought about the faculty offices where I used to work, the classrooms where I'd taught, the coffee shop where Amy Chen and I used to discuss poetry. All of it was gone now, buried under snow and death. Where's this group? Tom asked over the radio. Presbyterian Church on Elm Street, Gloria responded. Said they'd fortified the basement. We found the church easily, a white clapboard building with a tall steeple, one of the oldest structures in town. The parking lot had been plowed at some point, and smoke rose from what must have been a chimney or vent. Gloria honked the horn. 3 short blasts, our signal. Nothing happened. She honked again. Still nothing. I don't like this, Tom said over the radio. Neither did I. We sat there for a full minute, engines running, watching the church. Then the front door opened and a man stumbled out. Even from this distance, I could tell something was wrong with him. He moved with that characteristic jerky gait, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. Behind him, more figures emerged from the church. 4, 5, 6 of them, all infected. Son of a bitch, Gloria breathed. The group? Tom asked over the radio, his voice tight. Gone. The whole group is gone. We sat there in our vehicles, staring at what used to be 6 survivors and was now 6 more infected. They shambled toward us through the snow, slow in the extreme cold, but coming on. We need to put them down, I said. Gloria looked at me. You sure? They were people. Someone knew them, cared about them. We can't just leave them like this. She nodded and picked up the radio. Everyone out. We're clearing the church. Stay together. Watch your backs. And for God's sake, be careful. We formed a line. Me, Tom, and 2 men from the Governor group. Gloria covered us from the plow. Sarah stayed in the Explorer with Jake and Patricia. We advanced on the infected slowly, weapons ready. I recognized one of them. His name had been Father Michael, the church pastor. I had met him as a community event 2 years ago. A nice man who'd served me lemonade and talked about the importance of bringing people together. Now he was a frozen corpse animated by something that wore his face like a mask. I shot him in the head. He dropped. The others went down quickly. 6 shots. 6 bodies in the snow. When it was done, we checked the church. The basement was a horror show. 12 bodies, all of them showing signs of having turned and then killed each other in the enclosed space. Blood covered the walls. The smell, even in the cold, was overwhelming. We found evidence of what had happened. Medical supplies scattered around one body. Someone who'd been sick or injured, who'd turned, who'd spread the infection to everyone else in close quarters. Jesus, one of the Governor men whispered. Search for supplies, Gloria said, her voice hollow. Anything useful, food, medicine, fuel, then we burn it. We worked quickly, loading what little we could salvage into the vehicles. Then Gloria poured the remaining kerosene around the basement and lit it. We watched the church burn, black smoke rising into the gray sky. That's 8 more gone, Tom said quietly. We're down to 22. The drive to the next location was silent. We headed east toward the village of Norfolk, where a group of 4 had taken shelter in elementary school. I found myself gripping my rifle tighter, watching the tree line, half expecting more bad news. But the Norfolk group was alive. Barely. 4 women, all of them teachers from the school, huddled around a wood-burning stove in the cafeteria. They'd barricaded themselves in and were living on school lunch supplies. When they saw us, 2 of them actually cried. We thought we were the only ones left, one said. We thought everyone else was dead. Not yet, Gloria told them, but we need to move. All of us, together. By nightfall, we'd gathered the survivors from Norfolk and one more group from a farm outside Norwood. Our convoy now consisted of the snowplow, the Explorer, 2 pickup trucks, a Subaru Outback, and an old Dodge van that ran on hope and prayer. 22 survivors total, not counting Vanessa, Mike, and Robert back at the farmhouse. We stopped for the night at a highway rest area that Gloria had scouted previously. It was defensible, with a single entrance and thick walls. We parked the vehicle in a circle, posted guards, and tried to get some rest. I ended up on watch with Tom in the early morning hours, both of us sitting in the Explorer with the engine running for heat, watching the darkness for movement. You did good today, Tom said after a long silence. At the church. That wasn't easy. None of this is easy. No, but you keep showing up anyway. It counts for something. I thought about that. Gloria asked me what I need from this, from surviving. I didn't have an answer then, but I think I do now. What's that? Purpose. Before this, I taught literature to kids who mostly didn't care about it. I went through the motions, published papers nobody read, attended faculty meetings that didn't matter. I was alive, but I wasn't really living. Now, I gestured to the convoy, at the sleeping survivors. Now I'm part of something that actually matters. We're trying to save the last remnants of humanity in northern New York. That's purpose. Tom nodded slowly. I spent 20 years preparing for something like this. Built up supplies, learned survival skills, thought I was ready. But you know what I wasn't prepared for? The loneliness. The weight of making decisions that get people killed. The knowledge that everything I knew was gone forever. He looked at me. Having other people to share that weight with. That's what makes it bearable. We sat in silence after that, watching the sun rise over a dead world. When our watch ended, we woke the next shift and tried to sleep. The resort appeared through the trees in the afternoon of the second day. Cranberry Lake Lodge had been built in the 1920s as a vacation destination for wealthy families from North New York City. The main building was a massive lodge structure with a wraparound porch and a stone chimney. Smaller cabins dotted the property, and a dock extended into the frozen lake. The whole place was covered in snow, looking like something from a postcard. It was also completely undefended and potentially full of infected. Gloria stopped the convoy a quarter-mile away, and we gathered for a planning session. The temperature had climbed to a balmy -15 degrees, which meant the infected would be mobile if there were any around. We need to clear it building by building, Tom said, studying the layout. Main lodge first, then the cabins. Anyone see movement? We scanned the buildings through binoculars. Nothing moved except snow blowing off the roof. Could be empty, one of the Governor men said, hopefully. Or there could be infected inside, frozen, I countered. We won't know until we check. We divided into 3 teams. Tom led one group to clear the main lodge. Gloria took another to check the cabins on the east side. I led the third to the west side cabins. Sarah and Jake stayed with the vehicles along with anyone who couldn't fight. Our precious cargo of survivors who'd made it this far. My team consisted of Patricia from Governor and 2 of the Norfolk teachers, both of whom claimed they knew how to shoot. We approached the first cabin slowly, weapons ready. The door was unlocked. Inside, we found a small living room with a fireplace, a kitchenette, and a bedroom. No bodies, no blood, no sign of occupation at all. The place had been closed for the winter before everything fell apart. Clear, I called out. We moved to the next cabin. Same story. Empty, undisturbed, waiting for guests who would never come. By the time we checked all 6 west side cabins, I was starting to believe we might actually have found a safe place. Then we heard the gunshots from the main lodge. We ran toward the sound, slipping in the snow. I could see Tom's team at the lodge entrance, firing into the building. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkened doorway. How many? I shouted as we got closer. At least a dozen, Tom shouted back. They were in the basement. Must have been staff when it happened. They're slow, but there's a lot of them. Fall back! Gloria's voice came from somewhere to my left. Let them come out in the cold! Tom's team retreated from the doorway, and we formed a firing line about 20 yards away. The infected poured out of the lodge, not running, but shuffling with that horrible inevitability. In the daylight, I could see them clearly. Most wore service and industry clothes, polo shirts with the lodge logo, khaki pants, aprons. They'd been waiters, housekeepers, cooks. Now they were monsters. We opened fire. It took maybe 2 minutes to put them all down. 14 bodies lay in the snow when it was finished, steam rising from their wounds in the frigid air. We checked each one carefully. Sometimes they played dead, or were just wounded enough to be dangerous later. When we were sure they were truly gone, we finished clearing the lodge. The main building was spectacular. The lobby featured a 2-story stone fireplace, exposed log beams, and large windows overlooking the lake. There was a commercial kitchen, a dining hall that could seat 50, and a dozen guest rooms upstairs. The basement held storage, a generator room, and what looked like staff quarters, where the infected had been trapped. "This will work," Gloria said, looking around. "This will absolutely work." We spent the rest of the day securing the property and moving everyone inside. The generator system was intact, and one of the Governor men, a contractor named Steve, got it running using fuel we brought. Suddenly we had lights, heat from the baseboards, and running water from the well system. It felt like a miracle. That night, 22 survivors gathered in the main dining hall. We'd found food in the commercial freezer, a month's worth of meat, vegetables, and supplies that had frozen solid when the power went out. Gloria cooked steaks on the industrial range, and we ate like kings. "To Gloria," Tom said, raising his glass of melted snow water, "for getting us here alive." "To everyone," Gloria corrected. "We did this together." We drank to that. Then Jake spoke up. "What do we call this place? It can't just be the resort. It needs a name." "Sanctuary," one of the teachers suggested. "Too pretentious," Patricia said. "Haven?" another offered. "Too hopeful," someone else said. I thought about it. About everything we'd been through to get here. About the cold that had both saved us and nearly killed us. "What about Timshell?" I said. "It means thou mayest. The power to choose. We chose to survive. We chose to come together. We chose to try." People looked at each other, trying out the word. Then Gloria nodded. "Timshell. I like it. Place was built in the 20s. People back then knew about choosing to endure hard times." "All in favor?" Tom asked. Every hand went up. "Then it's settled," Tom said. "Welcome to Timshell." We spent that night making plans. The resort had space for more people. We could easily house 50. We had enough food for maybe 3 months if we were careful. The lake would provide water and fish in the spring. The woods around us held deer and other game. It wasn't sustainable forever, but it was a start. "Tomorrow," Gloria said, "I'd take the plow back to get Vanessa, Mike, and Robert. After that, we focus on fortification and gathering more supplies. There are still a few survivors scattered out there. We bring them here if we can. And we prepare for spring because when it comes..." She didn't finish. But we all knew. When spring came, the frozen dead would thaw, and we'd face the real test of whether humanity could survive. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, we were warm, we were fed, and we were together. I stood by the window, looking out the frozen lake. Behind me, I could hear people talking, laughing, making plans. Actual laughter, for the first time in weeks. The sound of people choosing to be more than just survivors. My reflection looked back at me from the glass. Thin, scarred, older than it should be, but alive. Still alive. "Timshell," I thought, "thou mayest." Tomorrow I would choose to keep going. Tomorrow I would choose to help build something worth surviving for. Tomorrow I would choose to hope. But tonight, I would simply stand here and listen to the sound of people being human again. And that was enough. Hello, brave souls. Welcome back to The Frozen Dead, Part 3. I hope you guys enjoy the story. Gloria left at dawn to retrieve Vanessa, Mike, and Robert. I stood on the dock watching the snowplow disappear down the access road, my breath crystallizing in air so cold it hurt to inhale. The thermometer on the lodge wall read -38 degrees, the coldest morning yet. At this temperature, exposed skin would freeze in under 2 minutes. The infected would be locked solid, frozen statues scattered across the landscape. But Gloria was still going out there, alone. "She'll be fine," Tom said from behind me. "That woman has survived things that would kill most men half her age." "Doesn't mean I have to like it." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." He walked back to the lodge together, boots crunching on snow so dry it squeaked. Inside, Tim's shell was coming to life. Patricia and 2 others were working in the kitchen, preparing breakfast from our precious supplies. Steve, the contractor, was in the basement checking the generator. The Norfolk teachers had organized a classroom in one of the guest rooms and were teaching Jake and 2 younger kids we'd picked up from the Norwoods farm. 22 people, all finding ways to contribute, all choosing to build something instead of just surviving. "Tom," I said as we reached the door, "what happens if she doesn't come back?" He paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Then we keep going. We organize, we fortify, and when spring comes, we fight. Because that's what she would want." It was the right answer, but it didn't make me feel better. Gloria returned 36 hours later. I was on watch in the main lodge when I heard the snowplow engine. Relief flooded through me as I saw the big yellow machine emerge from the trees, followed by Tom's truck with Vanessa driving. They'd all made it. We helped them unload, not just people, but supplies from the farmhouse. Tom had insisted on bringing everything useful: tools, ammunition, preserved food, even his gun cabinet. Mike and Vanessa emerged from the truck looking exhausted but alive. Robert Chen came last, helped up by Mike and Steve. He was pale and drawn, but he was walking. His left hand was bandaged heavily, and I could see the outlines of splints underneath the wrapping. "How is he?" I asked Vanessa as they got Robert inside. "Alive, which is better than I expected. I had to amputate 3 fingers. The frostbite was too severe. But the infection is under control, and he should make a full recovery otherwise." She looked at me with haunted eyes. I performed surgery on a kitchen table with supplies from a first aid kit to bourbon from anesthesia. Never thought I'd have to do that. He saved his life. This time. Next time. She shook her head. "We need proper medical supplies, Marcus. Antibiotics, painkillers, surgical instruments. What I have won't last." I filed that away. Another problem to solve. Another impossible task to add to the list. That night, we held what Gloria called a town meeting. All 25 of us gathered in the dining hall, sitting on chairs and benches pulled from throughout the lodge. Gloria stood at the front, looking tired but determined. "All right, people, listen up. We've got ourselves a situation here that needs addressing. We're safe for now. This place is defensible. We've got food and heat, and we're all together. But winter doesn't last forever. And when spring comes, we're going to have to face challenges we can barely imagine." She paused, letting that sink in. "So here's what I propose. We organize, properly. We divide up the responsibilities, we make plans, and we prepare for the thaw. Anyone object?" Silence. No one objected to the idea of preparation. "Good. Now, we need people in charge of different areas. Tom, you've got military experience. I'm thinking you handle security and defense. Work with whoever's willing to learn how to shoot, set up watch rotations, plan our perimeter defense." Tom nodded. "I can do that." "Vanessa, you're our medical officer. Make a list of everything you need, and we'll figure out how to get it. In the meantime, train anyone interested in basic first aid. We need backup in case something happens to you." "Understood," Vanessa said. "Steve, you know construction and mechanics. You're in charge of maintenance and fortification. This place is solid, but we can make it better. Figure out what we need and make it happen." Steve gave a thumbs up from the back of the room. Gloria continued down the list. Patricia would manage food and supplies. One of the Norfolk teachers, a woman named Helen, would handle education, keeping the kids learning, maintaining some semblance of normalcy. Mike would work with Steve on mechanical issues and vehicle maintenance. Then Gloria looked at me. "Marcus, you're my deputy. You help coordinate between groups. You think about long-term strategy, and you take it if something happens to me." I blinked. "Gloria, I'm not. You're smart. You think before you act, and people listen to you. That's what we need. So unless you got a better suggestion." I looked around the room. People were watching me. waiting. I thought about refusing, about insisting I was just a literature professor with no business leading anything. But that was the old world talking. In this world, everyone had to step up. Okay, I said. I'll do it. Good. Now, let's talk about our immediate priorities. We spent the next 2 hours discussing everything from watch schedules to latrine protocols. It should have been boring, but it felt important, like we were building the foundation for something real. By the time the meeting ended, everyone had assignments and everyone knew what was expected. As people filed out, Gloria pulled me aside. Walk with me. We went out onto the porch, bundling against the cold. The sun had set, and the stars were brilliant overhead. Gloria lit a cigarette, something I hadn't seen her do before. It took a long drag. Didn't know you smoked, I said. Started again after the world ended. Figured lung cancer wasn't exactly my biggest problem anymore. She blew smoke into the frozen air. I need to tell you something, Marcus. Something I haven't told the others. My stomach tightened. What? I'm sick. Have been for about 6 months. Breast cancer, stage 3. Was going through chemo when this all started. Obviously stopped when the hospitals collapsed. She took another drag. Best case scenario, I've got maybe 6 months. Probably less. I felt like I'd been punched. Gloria, don't. I've made my peace with it. But you need to know because you're going to be in charge sooner rather than later. These people need leadership, and I won't be here to provide it forever. There has to be something. There isn't. Not without hospitals. Not without treatment. Hell, even with treatment, my odds were between maybe 50-50. She smiled sadly. But I can do some good with the time I have left. I can help get this place organized. Help give these people a chance. That's enough. We stood in silence, watching our breath freeze in the air. Finally, I asked, does anyone else know? Vanessa suspects, but I haven't confirmed it. Let's keep it that way for now. People need to believe we got a stable leadership structure. They can't be worrying about me dying. With Gloria, that's an order, Deputy. Her voice was gentle but firm. We tell them when we have to, not before. I wanted to argue, but I understood the reasoning. Hope was fragile out here, and uncertainty would shatter it. Okay, I said. But you let me know if you need anything. Anything at all. I will. She dropped the cigarette and crushed it under her boot. Now let's get inside before we freeze to death. Would be ironic to survive the apocalypse and die of stupidity. The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm. We organized into shifts and teams. Tom trained anyone willing to learn how to shoot, which turned out to be almost everyone. Even Helen, who admitted she'd been a pacifist before, spent hours at a makeshift range learning to handle a rifle. I'll pray for forgiveness later, she said grimly. Right now, I'll pray for accuracy. Steve led work crews to fortify the lodge. We boarded up first floor windows, reinforced doors with metal plates scavenged from the resort's maintenance shed, and built elevated platforms for guards to watch their approaches. The work was brutal in the cold, but everyone contributed. Patricia implemented a strict rationing system for our food supplies. We had enough for 3 months, maybe 4 if we stretched it. She organized hunting parties that brought back deer and rabbits. The cold made tracking easier, and the animals were desperate enough to be less cautious. We hung the meat in an unheated cabin that served as a natural freezer. I found myself in a dozen different roles. One morning I'd be helping Steve reinforce a door. In the afternoon I'd be working with Tom on defense strategies. Evenings I'd check in with each group leader, coordinate schedules, solve problems. It was exhausting, but it kept me from thinking too much about David and his family, about the burning school in Malone, about all the ways this still could go wrong. Jake became my unofficial assistant. The kid had a sharp mind and a talent for logistics. He'd create schedules, track supplies, and spot potential problems before they became crises. He rarely smiled, but he was always reliable. You're good at this, I told him one afternoon as we checked inventory in the storage room. He shrugged. My dad was an accountant. He used to say organization was the foundation of everything. Guess he was right. Was? He turned on the third day. I saw it happen. Jake's voice was matter of fact, but his hands shook slightly as he marked numbers on his clipboard. Mom and I locked ourselves in my bedroom. We could hear him outside the door for hours, scratching, making these sounds. Eventually, he stopped, and we came out. He swallowed hard. He was just standing in the living room, staring at nothing. Mom tried to talk to him, but he attacked her. I hit him with a baseball bat until he stopped moving. I didn't know what to say. What could you say to a 12-year-old who'd killed his own father? It wasn't him anymore, Jake continued. I know that. Mom knows that. But I still see his face sometimes when I close my eyes. Still hear the sounds he made. That's normal, I said quietly. After what you've been through, nightmares are normal. You have them too? I thought about my dreams. David reaching for me with dead eyes. Emma and Liam crying in the snow. Professor Richardson with a kitchen knife. Yeah, I do. Do they get better? I wanted to lie, to give him some comfort, but Jake deserved the truth. I don't know yet, but we keep going anyway. He nodded, accepting this. We went back to counting supplies in silence. The radio call on January 15th during the morning check-in. Gloria and I were in her room. She'd taken over the resort manager's office on the first floor, when Tom's voice crackled over the CB. Gloria, Marcus, we've got movement on the lake. Multiple contacts, heading this way. We grabbed our coats and ran outside. Tom was on the dock with binoculars, scanning the frozen lake. He handed them to Gloria without a word. I could see them even without magnification. Dark shapes moving across the white expanse of the frozen lake. Dozens of them, maybe 100, shambling toward us in a loose cluster. Where do they come from? I asked. Tom pointed north, across the lake. There's a summer camp on the far shore, about 2 miles. Must have been occupied when this started. They've been frozen over there all this time. And now they're mobile enough to cross, Gloria finished. The temperature's been climbing. We hit -10 yesterday, warmest I've seen in weeks. I watched the binoculars as the infected made their slow progress across the ice. They moved with that characteristic shambling gait, but even from here I could see them struggling. Some fell through thin spots in the ice and had to claw their way out. Others moved in jerky, uncertain steps, like they were learning to walk again. How long until they reach us? I asked. Tom calculated. At their current pace, 6 to 8 hours. Can they make it across? Will the ice hold? Lake's been frozen solid for 2 months. It'll hold. Gloria lowered her binoculars. Tom, get everyone armed and in position. Marcus, help me figure out where we make our stand. If there's 100 of them and 25 of us, we need to be smart about this. We spent the next hour planning. The dock was the obvious choke point, narrow with good sight lines, and we could fall back to the lodge if necessary. But the ice extended all the way around to the shore on either side of the dock. The infected could spread out, come at us from multiple angles. We need to funnel them, Tom said, studying the layout. Force them to bunch up where we can concentrate our fire. Steve had an idea. We could build barriers on either side of the dock. Use picnic tables, logs, whatever we can find. Create a kill zone they have to walk through. Do it, Gloria said. You've got 4 hours. Everyone not on the construction crew, get to the range. I want every gun checked, cleaned, and loaded. Patricia, bring up all the ammo we have. All of it. People scrambled to work. Steve organized teams to build barricades. I helped drag picnic tables from around the property and position them to create narrow approaches to the lodge. Tom set up firing positions on the dock and the lodge porch, calculated angles and distances. The children, Jake and the 2 younger ones, were sent to the uppermost floor of the lodge with Sarah and Helen. They would be the last line of defense if everything else failed. Though I tried not to think about what would happen if it came to that. By early afternoon, our defenses were ready. The barricades created a funnel about 20 feet wide leading up from the lake. We had firing positions on 3 levels: the dock, the lodge porch, and second floor windows. Everyone who could shoot had a weapon and a stack of loaded magazines. And then we waited. I stood on the dock with Tom, Gloria, Mike, and 4 others, watching the infected creep closer across the ice. The temperature had climbed to maybe -5, practically balmy compared to what we've been experiencing. But it also meant the infected were moving faster, their frozen joints loosening as their core heat did its impossible work. "I count 83, Tom said, peering through his scope. "Most are adults, but I see at least a dozen that might have been teenagers." "Summer camp," Gloria said quietly. "Those are probably counselors and campers. Kids." No one said anything to that. What was there to say? They reached the shore an hour before sunset. In the fading light, they looked like a nightmare made of real, dozens of frozen, shambling corpses, their clothes torn and stained, their skin gray and black with frostbite. Some were missing limbs. Others had horrific wounds. But they all had that same dead eyes and relentless purpose. They hit the barricades and immediately began to try to push through or climb over. The narrow funnel did its job. They bunched up, crowded against each other, making perfect targets. "Hold your fire," Gloria called out. Wait until they're in the kill zone." The infected pressed forward, climbing over fallen picnic tables, squeezing between gaps. 20 feet from the dock. 15. 10. Fire! The world exploded in gunfire. I aimed at the nearest infected, a woman in a summer camp counselor shirt, and squeezed the trigger. She went down. I shifted to the next target, fired again. Around me, others were doing the same. The sound was deafening, overwhelming. The infected fell in rows, but more kept coming, climbing over the bodies of the ones we'd dropped, driven by whatever instinct or infection compelled them. I emptied my magazine, reloaded, emptied it again. My shoulder ached from the recoil. My ears rang. Brass casings piled at my feet. "They're flanking!" someone shouted. I looked to the right and saw infected streaming around the edge of the barricade, coming up the shore where we hadn't built adequate defenses. There were too many. We couldn't cover every approach. "Fall back to the lodge," Gloria ordered. "Move! Move! Move!" We retreated in stages, some providing covering fire while others ran for the porch. I was halfway there when I slipped on the icy ground and went back down hard. My rifle skittered away across the snow. An infected man lunged at me. Teenage, maybe 17, wearing a camp t-shirt that said "Junior Counselor." His face wore a ruin of frost and decay, but I could see that he'd been somebody's son, somebody's friend. I fumbled for my Glock as he reached for me, got it out, pressed it against his chest, and fired 3 shots. He collapsed on top of me, heavy and cold and reeking of death. Mike hauled me to my feet and we ran to the lodge. Behind us, the infected poured through our defensive line, overwhelming the barricades by sheer numbers. We made it to the porch, and Steve slammed the reinforced door behind us. "Second floor!" Tom was shouting. "Everyone to the windows! Overlapping fields of fire!" We thundered up the stairs. The windows had been prepared days ago with shooting positions and ammunition, stockpiles. I took a spot next to Tom and looked down at the scene below. The infected were everywhere, surrounding the lodge, pressing against the doors and walls, climbing on top of each other, trying to reach the windows. There were far too many than 83. Either we'd miscounted or more had just joined from the woods. "Aimed fire!" Tom commanded. "Make every shot count!" We settled into a grim rhythm. Identify target. Fire. Next target. Reload. Fire. The pile of bodies grew around the lodge, but they still came. An hour passed. Then 2. The sun set, and we switched to flashlight duct tape to our rifles. The cold was brutal. The windows were open for shooting, and the winter air poured in, but we couldn't stop. If we stopped, they'd eventually break through. I was down to my last magazine when I heard the sound. It was distant at first, barely audible over the gunfire. A rumbling, mechanical sound that grew louder. Then I saw lights cutting through the darkness from across the road. Headlights. Multiple vehicles. "Hold fire!" Gloria shouted. "We've got incoming!" The vehicles burst into view. 3 pickup trucks and a panel van, all moving at high speed. They plowed into the infected from behind, scattered them like bowling pins. Men and women jumped out with rifles and shotguns, forming a firing line, cutting into the infected from the rear. Within minutes, the tide turned. Caught between two groups of shooters, the infected fell rapidly. The ones that tried to flee back toward the lake were picked off. The ones that pressed toward the lodge ran into our concentrated fire from above. 20 minutes later, it was over. The sudden silence was almost painful. I stood at the window, ears ringing, staring at the scene below. Bodies littered the ground, hundreds of them, scattered across the snow like broken toys. The new arrivals were checking corpses, making sure nothing was getting back up. Gloria was already heading downstairs. I followed, reloading my pistol with shaking hands. The leader of the new group was a tall black man in his 40s, wearing a thick parka and carrying a rifle like he knew how to use it. He met Gloria at the door, and they exchanged a look of mutual respect. "Calvin Morrison," he said, "from the Fort Drum civilian housing. We've been monitoring your radio traffic, figuring you could use some help." "You figured right," Gloria said. "How many are you?" 17. We've got more supplies in the trucks. Food, ammunition, medical equipment. Thought we might pool resources. You want to join us?" Calvin looked at the lodge, at the bodies scattered around it, at the exhausted survivors watching from the windows. "If you'll have us. Seems like you got a good thing going here. Better than what we had, anyway." Gloria smiled. A real smile. The first I'd seen from her in days. "Welcome to Tim's Shell. Let's get you inside before we all freeze." That night, we had 42 people in the lodge. Calvin's group brought not just numbers, but expertise. 3 of them were former military with combat experience. 2 were nurses who could help Vanessa. 1 was a teacher who could work with Helen. They had food, ammunition, and most crucially, winter clothing and supplies we'd salvaged from the base exchange before evacuating. We held an impromptu celebration in the dining hall. Nothing fancy, just hot food and the knowledge that we'd survived another day. Patricia cooked venison stew with vegetables from our stores, and we ate until we actually full for the first time in weeks. I found myself sitting next to Calvin, who was telling war stories from his time in Afghanistan. He'd been a sergeant, did 3 tours, then got out and worked as a contractor on base. "Never thought I'd be fighting war on American soil," he said, shaking his head. "Especially not against the dead." "Any of this match your military training?" "Not even close. We trained for human enemies who thought tactically, who could be intimidated or outsmarted. These things?" He gestured vaguely at the windows toward the bodies outside. "They don't think, don't feel fear, don't stop unless you put them down permanently. It's a different kind of war." "How did you survive at Fort Drum? I heard the base went dark." Calvin's expression darkened. "It did. We weren't on the base proper. We were in civilian housing on the outskirts. When the outbreak hit the base, the military locked it down tight. Those of us on the outside were on our own. We watched the base go dark sector by sector, heard gunfire for days. Then nothing." He paused. "I tried to get my family inside when it started. They wouldn't let me through the gate. Said they were following quarantine protocols. Couldn't risk exposure. My wife and kids were with me, so at least we stayed together. But a lot of people..." He shook his head. "I'm sorry. It is what it is. We survived. That's what matters." He looked at me. "Gloria says you're her deputy. What's your background?" English professor. I taught at SUNY Potsdam before this. Calvin laughed. A professor? Well, shit. We're in good hands. At least someone here can diagram a sentence while the world burns. I bristled slightly. I've kept 25 people alive for the past month. I think that counts for something. Easy, Professor. I'm not insulting you. Hell, I'm impressed. Military teaches you a specific kind of thinking. Tactical, hierarchical, mission-focused. Civilians have to figure it out from scratch, and most don't survive long enough to get good at it. The fact that you did means you're smarter and tougher than you probably give yourself credit for. His words diffused my anger. Thanks, I think. Take it as the compliment it is. He raised his cup of water. To the unlikely survivors, may we keep muddling through. I drank to that. Later, I found Gloria outside on the porch, smoking another cigarette. The bodies from the battle were still scattered across the snow. We'd deal with them tomorrow when we had daylight and weren't exhausted. 42 people, she said. We're actually building something here. Calvin's group changes things. We've got real military expertise now. More medical support, more hands to work. It also means more mouths to feed and more people to protect. She took a drag. But yeah, that's good. Better than I hoped for. I leaned against the railing, looking at the stars. How are you feeling, really? You mean, am I dying yet? She smiled without humor. A little more every day, but I'm still here. Still useful. That's what matters. Gloria. Don't, Marcus. We've had this conversation. I'm not interested in pity or false hope. I'm interested in making sure these 42 people have the best chance possible when I'm gone. When you're gone. I'm not sure I can. Yes, you can. You've been doing this for weeks without realizing it. You think, you plan, you solve problems, and people trust you. That's leadership. The rest is just confidence, and that'll come with time. We stood in silence, watching our breath freeze. Finally, Gloria said, You know what gives me hope? That kid, Jake. He's 12 years old. He's been through hell, and he's still here trying to help. If he can keep going, so can we. He told me about his father, about what he had to do. Gloria nodded. Sarah told me. Kid's got trauma that'll take years to process, if he lived long enough for therapy to be a thing again. But he's channeling it into something productive. That takes strength. He's been following me around, helping with logistics and planning. I think he needs a purpose, something to focus on besides the nightmares. Then give him that purpose. We all need reasons to keep going. She dropped her cigarette and crushed it out. Speaking of which, we need to start thinking long term, not just surviving winter, but what comes after. Spring thaw, when the infected become fully mobile again. Right. We've got maybe 6 weeks before that happens. We need to be ready. Better defenses, more ammunition, clear plans for evacuation if this place gets overrun. And we need to start thinking about food sources beyond hunting. The resort has a garden area out back. In spring, we could try planting. You really think we'll make it to planting season? Gloria looked at me, and for a moment I saw past her tough exterior to the scared, dying woman underneath. I have to believe that, Marcus, because if I don't, what's the point of any of this? I didn't have an answer to that. The next 6 weeks were the hardest yet. The temperature remained brutally cold, -20 most days, dipping as low as -40 on the worst nights. We burned through firewood at an alarming rate, and Calvin organized expeditions to cut from the surrounding forest. It was dangerous work in the extreme cold, but necessary. The infected appeared regularly, drawn by our smoke and noise. Most were frozen enough to be slow, but we couldn't let our guard down. Tom and Calvin organized the defense into 3 shifts, ensuring we always had armed guards watching the perimeter. Vanessa and Calvin's 2 nurses set up a proper medical bay in one of the larger rooms. They inventoried our supplies and came back with a grim report. We had enough antibiotics for maybe 3 serious infections, Enough painkillers for 2 weeks if someone had been badly hurt, and virtually no surgical supplies beyond what Vanessa had improvised for Robert. We need to raid a hospital or pharmacy, Vanessa said during one of our leadership meetings. Soon, before spring when it becomes impossible. Everything within 30 miles has been picked over, Gloria said. The population centers went first. Everyone had the same idea about stocking up on medicine. Calvin leaned forward. There's a veterinary clinic outside of Governor. I drove past it on the way here. Looked intact. Probably not looted. Veterinary medications aren't identical to human meds, but a lot of them are close enough. It's something, Vanessa agreed. Better than nothing. I looked at Gloria. She was thinner than when we'd first met her, her face more drawn. The cancer was eating away at her, invisible but relentless. We should send a team. Small, fast, in and out. I'll lead it, Calvin said immediately. Take 3 others. Use one of the trucks. 2-day trip, there and back. I'm coming, I said. Calvin raised an eyebrow. Professor? I'm coming, I repeated. You'll need someone who can read labels and medical terminology. Plus, I've been on supply runs before. Gloria studied me for a moment, then nodded. Calvin leads, Marcus goes a second. Pick 2 more people. You leave tomorrow morning when the temperature is warmest, which is saying something since warmest still will be -15. You got 48 hours. If you're not back by then, we assume the worst. We spent that evening preparing. I checked my weapons, packed supplies, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Jake found me in my room, his expression serious. You're going out here, or you're going out there, he said. It wasn't a question. Yeah. You're going to be careful, right? Because we need you here. I need. He stopped, struggling with words. You're like, you listen to me. You don't treat me like a kid. Most adults either ignore me or act like I'm going to break. You're different. I set down the magazine I was loading and looked at him. Jake, you've been more helpful to me than you know. You keep me organized, you spot problems I miss, and you remind me why we're doing this. So yeah, I'll be careful. I've got reasons to come back. He nodded, satisfied, then handed me a piece of paper. I made a list of all the medications Vanessa needs, prioritized them by importance. The vet stuff might have different names, so I wrote the generic chemical names too. Figured it might help. I looked at the list. Detailed, thorough, organized. The handwriting was a child's, but the content was sophisticated. Jake, this is excellent work. He flushed with pride. Just trying to help. You are helping. More than you know. That night, I lay in my sleeping bag staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside. Somewhere out in the darkness, the frozen dead waited. Tomorrow I'd be going back out among them, leaving the relative safety of Timshell, risking everything for medication we desperately needed. But that was the choice, wasn't it? Timshell, thou mayest. You could choose to hide behind walls and hope safety lasted. Or you could choose to take risks, to help others, to try to build something worth surviving for. I chose to try. Tomorrow would be dangerous. Tomorrow might be the day I didn't come back. But tomorrow, I would also be doing something that mattered. Something that might save lives. It was enough. I closed my eyes, and for once, didn't dream of the dead. Hello, brave souls. Today we've got part 4 of the Frozen Dead series. It's actually the final part, so I hope you guys have enjoyed the series up to this point, and I hope you guys enjoyed this story. So let's just get right to it. We left at first light with the temperature reading -19 degrees. Calvin drove the pickup truck, a Ford F-250 with chains on the tires and a reinforced grille that Steve had welded on the front. I rode shotgun, literally and figuratively, with my rifle across my lap. In the back seat were 2 of Calvin's people, Rodriguez, a compact woman in her 30s who'd been a military police officer, and Chen, no relation to Robert. a quiet man in his 20s who'd worked base security. Rules, Calvin says as we pulled away from the lodge. 1, we stick together. No wandering off. 2, we don't engage unless we have to. Our mission is supplies, not body count. 3, if something goes sideways, we get back to the truck and we leave. Nobody plays hero. Everyone clear? We all nodded. Through the truck's back window, I could see people watching us from the lodge porch. Tom, Gloria, Vanessa. Jake stood next to Sarah, his hand raised in a small wave. I waved back, hoping it wasn't the last time I'd see them. The drive to Governor took 3 hours. The roads were buried underneath snow, and we had to navigate around abandoned vehicles and fallen trees. Calvin drove with practiced caution, never going faster than 25 miles per hour, always watching for black ice or weak spots where the road might have washed out beneath the snow. We passed through 2 small towns, or what was left of them. Richville was completely abandoned. Its main street a corridor of dark storefronts and frozen bodies half buried in drifts. We saw movement in a few places, infected trapped in buildings, clawing at windows, but nothing that posed an immediate threat. "Look at that," Rodriguez said, pointing to a church where someone had sprayed painted a message on white clapboard. "Gone south to FEMA, March 2025. God help us." "March?" Chen said quietly. "That was 8 months ago. Think they made it?" "No," Calvin said flatly. "There is no FEMA. There is no government. There's just us and everyone else trying to survive." We drove on in silence. Governor appeared through the trees around noon. It was a larger town than Richville, maybe 4,000 people before the outbreak. Now it looked like a war zone. Cars were crashed into buildings, storefronts were shattered, and bodies, both human and infected, lay scattered in the streets. "Jesus," Rodriguez whispered. Calvin slowed to a crawl, scanning the area. Vet clinic should be on the east side, near the edge of town. Private practice, single building, parking lot. Owner was ex-military. Liked to keep to himself. Probably why it wasn't looted. "Or it's full of infected," I said. "That too." We navigated through the town carefully, avoiding the main streets where possible. I saw more spray-painted messages. "No food here. Infected inside. Sarah plus kids. We went to Watertown." Each one a small tragedy, a story that would never be finished. The veterinary clinic sat in a corner lot, a single-story brick building with a faded sign. Governor Animal Hospital, Dr. James Patterson, DVM. The parking lot was empty, except for one vehicle, a green Subaru with New York plates, buried underneath snow. Calvin stopped the truck 50 yards away and killed the engine. We sat there, watching, listening. Nothing moved. No sounds except the wind. "Could be clear," Rodriguez said hopefully. "Could be full of frozen infected waiting to thaw," I countered. Calvin picked up a pair of binoculars and studied the building. Windows are intact. Doors looked closed. No obvious signs of breach. He lowered the binoculars. "We check it out, slow and careful. Rodriguez and I go first. Marcus, you and Chen cover from here. If we signal all clear, you follow. If we signal danger, you start the truck and be ready to move." "Got it," I said. Calvin and Rodriguez climbed out of the truck, weapons ready. They moved toward the clinic in a tactical formation I recognized from movies, but had never seen in person. One covering while the other advanced, leapfrogging forward. They reached the front door, and Calvin tried the handle. Locked. He gestured to Rodriguez, who moved around to check the back. He disappeared around the corner of the building, and I felt my heart rate kick up. Long seconds passed. Then she reappeared and gave Calvin a thumbs up. Calvin waved us forward. Chen and I approached the building, keeping my rifles up. Rodriguez had found a back door that opened into what looked like a storage area. We slipped inside, and immediately the temperature difference hit me. It was still cold, but maybe 30 degrees warmer than outside. Cold enough to see your breath, but not cold enough to freeze instantly. The clinic interior was dark and still. We moved through the storage room into a hallway, lined with examination rooms. One door stood ajar, and through it I could see metal tables and medical equipment. Everything was dusty but intact. It didn't look like anyone had been here in months. Pharmacy should be in the back, Calvin whispered. Patterson would have been controlled substance in a secure location. We found it behind a door marked staff only, a small room lined with shelves and refrigerators. The refrigerators were dark and useless without power, but the shelves held exactly what we needed. Bottles of pills, vials of injectable medications, boxes of syringes and medical supplies. I pulled out Jake's list and started matching names. Amoxicillin, check. Tramadol, check. Ketamine, check. Holy shit, he's got everything. Start loading, Calvin ordered. We take it all. Don't bother being selective. Just grab everything that looks useful. We worked quickly, filling our backpacks with bottles and supplies. I was reaching for a high shelf when I heard it. A sound from somewhere else in the building. A scraping, shuffling sound. We all froze. Infected? Rodriguez mouthed. Calvin held up his hand for a silence. He listened. The sound came again. Definitely movement, coming from the front of the building. Something was in here with us. Pack up now, Calvin whispered. Quiet as you can. We loaded our bags as silently as possible, but every movement seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. The shuffling sound grew closer. I could hear breathing now. Wet, labored breathing. Calvin pointed toward the back door. We moved in single file, Rodriguez leading me in the rear. We were almost to the storage room when a figure appeared in the hallway ahead of us. It had been a large man once, maybe 6'4" and 300 pounds. Now it was a frozen nightmare. Skin gray and black with frostbite, clothes torn and bloody, eyes milky and dead. But the size hadn't changed. This thing was massive, and it was blocking our exit. Back, Calvin hissed. We reversed direction, moving toward the front of the building. Behind us, the infected man shambled forward, arms outstretched. He moved slowly. The cold had locked his joints, but he was persistent. We reached the reception area, just as another infected emerged from an examination room. This one had been a woman, wearing what looked like veterinary scrubs. She was faster than the man, less affected by the cold. Front door, I said. We go through the front. Calvin tried the door, locked from the inside, but with a deadbolt he could turn. He twisted it, threw the door open, and we spilled out into the parking lot, right into a crowd of infected. There were at least 20 of them, scattered across the lot and street beyond. They had been standing motionless, frozen in place, but our sudden appearance activated them. Heads turned, arms reached. They began shuffling toward us. Truck! Calvin shouted. We ran. The infected were slow, but there were so many of them, and they were coming from multiple directions. I heard gunfire behind me. Rodriguez taking down the two that had followed us out of the clinic. Chen was firing at the ones blocking our path to the truck. I saw Calvin reach the F-250, saw him throw open the driver's door. Then I saw the infected man who'd been hiding beneath the truck. He grabbed Calvin's ankle and pulled. Calvin went down hard, his rifle flying from his hands. The infected man, wearing what looked like a snowplow operator's uniform, pulled himself up Calvin's leg, reaching for his throat. I didn't think. I ran forward and kicked the infected man in the head as hard as I could. My boot connected with a sickening crunch, and he released Calvin's leg. I kicked again, then put 2 rounds from my Glock into his skull. He stopped moving. Get up! I hauled Calvin to his feet. We piled into the truck, Calvin driving, Rodriguez in front with me, Chen in the back. Calvin started the engine and reversed hard, crushing an infected woman beneath the wheels. Then he threw it into drive and accelerated. We plowed through the crowd of infected, the reinforced grille doing its job. Bodies bounced off the hood or disappeared beneath the tires. Calvin didn't slow down until we were clear of town, doing 40 miles per hour on snow-covered road that wouldn't be suicide under normal circumstances. Everyone okay? He gasped. Alive, Rodriguez said. Jesus Christ, that was close. I looked at Calvin's leg where the infected man had grabbed him. His pants were torn, but I couldn't see any blood. You're not bitten? No, scratched maybe, but not bitten. He glanced at me. You saved my life back there, Professor. Thank you. You would have done the same. Yeah, but you actually did it, and that counts for something. We drove for another hour in tense silence, constantly watching the road ahead and behind. But nothing followed us, and by the time we reached Richville, we were starting to believe we might actually make it back. That's when the truck started making a grinding noise. Calvin pulled over immediately, and we all climbed out to investigate. Chen crawled into the truck and emerged with a grim expression. Differential is damaged. Probably hit something when we were running over those things. We can make it a few more miles, maybe, but it's going to fail. How far to Timshell? I asked. Calvin checked the map. 22 miles. Can we walk that? Not in this cold. Not carrying this much weight. He looked at the sky, which was darkening with approaching weather, and not with a storm coming. Rodriguez studied the town around us. We could hole up here, find a secure building, and wait out the storm, then walk back when it clears. The truck? Chen asked. We strip it for supplies and abandon it. No choice. Calvin slammed his fist against the hood in frustration. God damn it! Gloria's going to kill me. Gloria's going to be happy we're alive, I said. The truck is replaceable. We're not. We spent the next hour searching for shelter. Most of the buildings in Richville were too exposed or already compromised, but we found a small brick library that looked intact. The doors were locked, but Chen managed to force one open with a crowbar we'd taken from the clinic. The interior was cold and dark, but structurally sound. We barricaded the doors, cleared the building room by room to make sure we were alone, and set up camp in the main reading room. Calvin tried the radio, but either we were too far from Timshell or the approaching storm was interfering. We couldn't raise anyone. We'll try again in the morning, he said. For now, we conserve heat, take turns on watch, and wait this out. The storm hit around midnight. I was on watch when the first flakes started falling. Within minutes, it became a full blizzard, wind howling, snow coming down so thick you couldn't see more than a few feet. The temperature plummeted. Even inside the library, it was brutally cold. We huddled together in our sleeping bags, trying to conserve body heat. Rodriguez had found some books and were burning them in a metal trash can for warmth. A sacrilege that would have horrified me 8 months ago. But now was just survival. The fire didn't provide much heat, but it was something. Tell me about before, Rodriguez said, staring at the flames. Before all this, what did you do, Professor? I taught. American literature, mostly. The classics. Steinbeck, Hemingway, Fitzgerald. Did you like it? I thought about that. I thought I did. Now I'm not sure. I liked the ideas, the discussions about meaning and purpose, but I think I was hiding in books instead of actually living. I fed another torn page into the fire. What about you? Military police, 8 years. I liked it. Clear rules, clear purpose. Then I got stationed at Fort Drum and met somebody. Got married, had a kid. Her voice went quiet. They didn't make it out. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Everyone's lost someone. She looked at me. You learn to carry it. The grief doesn't get smaller. You just get stronger at carrying it. Calvin stirred from where he'd been trying to sleep. Storm's getting worse. We might be here a while. He was right. The blizzard lasted 3 days. We survived on the supplies we'd brought and the meager heat from our book-burning fire. The temperature inside the library hovered around 0 degrees, cold enough that we had to keep moving to avoid hypothermia, but warm enough that we weren't in immediate danger of freezing to death. On the second day, Calvin finally raised Timshell on the radio. Gloria's voice came through, crackling like static. Calvin, where the hell are you? Richville. Truck broke down. We're weathering the storm. We're all alive, and we got the supplies. Storm's hitting us too. We've lost power. Generator froze up. How long can you hold out? Calvin looked at our dwindling piles of books to burn. 3 more days, maybe 4. After that, we'll have to risk the walk. Negative. You stay put. When the storm clears, we'll come get you. Gloria out. The radio went silent. Rodriguez looked at me. You trust her to come? Yes, I said without hesitation. Gloria doesn't leave people behind. The 3rd day was the worst. We were out of food, down to our last books to burn, and the cold was seeping into our bones. Chen had stopped talking, just sat wrapped in his sleeping bag and shivered. Rodriguez kept checking her weapons obsessively. Calvin tried to stay positive, but I could see the strain in his face. I found myself thinking about David and his family, about the choice he'd made to take them to the high school shelter, believing it was the right thing to do, about how sometimes you make the right decision you can with the information you have, and it still goes wrong. I thought about Gloria, dying slowly while trying to save everyone else, about Jake, 12 years old and traumatized, but still showing up every day, about Vanessa and Mike, staying behind to save Robert's life, about all the small acts of courage and sacrifice I'd witnessed over the past months. We were so fragile, so breakable, but we kept choosing to try. Timshel, thou mayest. The storm broke on the morning of the 4th day. We emerged from the library into a world transformed. Snow had drifted 10 feet high in places, completely remaking the landscape. The cold was absolute, probably -40 with a wind chill. We can't walk in this, Shen said. His first words in 24 hours. We'd die before we make it 5 miles. Then we wait for Gloria, Calvin said, and we hope she can make it through. We spent the day rationing our last energy bars and trying to stay warm. We kept watch at 2nd floor window, scanning the road for any signs of rescue. The sun traced its low arc across the southern sky, and the shadows grew long. Then, just before sunset, I saw it. A flash of yellow in the distance. The plow! I shouted. Gloria's coming! The snowplow emerged from the white landscape like a miracle, its massive blade throwing snow aside, its engine roaring. Behind it came 2 pickup trucks, following in the cleared path. We ran outside, waving our arms. Gloria stopped the plow and climbed down, looking exhausted but determined. Tom was in one of the trucks, Mike in the other. You people look like shit, Gloria said. But she was smiling. You came, I said stupidly. Told you I don't leave people behind. She looked at our gear. You got the meds? All of them, Calvin confirmed. Mission accomplished. Well, let's get the hell home. The ride back to Chimshell took 2 hours. We rode in Tom's truck, wrapped in blankets, slowly thawing out. Tom filled us in what we missed. The storm had been brutal. They'd lost 3 cabin roofs to snow load, and the generator had indeed frozen. Steve was working on repairs, but they'd been without electricity for 3 days. Any infected activity? Calvin asked. None. Storm was too severe. Everything out there is frozen solid. Tom glanced at us in the rearview mirror. But the temperature's climbing. We're up to -5 now. By next week, we could see above -0 for the first time, or we could see above 0 for the first time since November. That's good, right? Rodriguez asked. For us, maybe, but it also means the infected will start moving again. And spring is coming, which means... He didn't need to finish. Spring meant the thaw. The real thaw. When hundreds of thousands of infected across New York would become fully mobile again. We arrived at Timshell after dark to find people waiting on the lodge porch with lanterns. Vanessa rushed forward as we climbed out of the truck, immediately checking us for injuries. Jake was there too, his face lighting up when he saw me. You made it, he said. We did. We got everything on your list. His smile was the first genuine one I'd seen from him since we'd met. Really? Everything? Every single thing. You're a hell of a researcher, kid. Inside, the lodge was cold without the generator, but someone had gotten the wood stove blazing, and people had gathered around it. We distributed the medication to Vanessa, who looked like we'd handed her gold bars. Patricia had somehow put together a hot meal, venison and root vegetables, and we ate like we'd been starving. Gloria pulled me aside after dinner. You did good out there. Calvin told me what happened, how you saved him. Just reacted, didn't think about it. That's what leadership is sometimes. Reacting in the moment, doing what needs to be done. She looked at me seriously. I'm glad you made it back. These people need you. Gloria, I'm getting worse, Marcus. I can feel it. Maybe a month left, probably less. She held up her hand to stop my protest. I'm not afraid. I've made my peace. But you need to be ready. When I'm gone, this falls on you. Can you handle that? I looked around the room at the 42 survivors, talking, eating, being alive. I thought about everything we'd been through, everything we built together. It was terrifying and overwhelming and impossible. But it was also my choice. Yes, I said. I can handle it. Good. She squeezed my shoulder. Now get some rest. Tomorrow we start preparing for spring. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Steve got the generator working again, which meant we had electricity and heat. The temperature continued to climb. -5, then 0, then above freezing during the day. The snow began to melt, revealing the ground beneath the first time in months, and the infected began to move. We saw them from the windows and guard posts, solitary figures at first, shambling through the woods, then small groups, then larger ones. They were drawn by our presence, our heat, the signs of life. Tom organized increased patrols and watch rotations. We built additional barricades and cleared fields of fire around the lodge. Calvin and his military people ran drills, teaching everyone tactics and coordination. Even the kids participated. Jake proved to be a surprisingly good shot with a .22 rifle, and he helped train the 2 younger children in basic safety. Vanessa used the veterinary medications to set up a proper medical system. She trained 5 people in first aid and emergency responses. When one of the hunters broke his leg in a fall, she set it properly with real supplies instead of improvised materials. The man would walk with a limp, but he would walk. We were becoming something real, not just survivors huddled in the cold, but a community with systems and skills and purpose. Gloria grew weaker. It happened gradually at first, then rapidly. She stopped making her rounds in the snowplow. Then she stopped attending daily meetings. Then she stopped leaving her room. Vanessa did what she could, managing her pain with the limited medication we had. But there was no cure for cancer in the apocalypse. I visited her every day. We'd talk about the community, about plans for spring, about all the things that still needed to be done. She'd give advice, share insights from her years of experience, prepare me for the role I didn't want but knew I'd have to take. You'll do fine, she said one afternoon in early March. She was in bed, thin and frail, but her eyes were still sharp. You care about people, and you think before you act. That's more than most leaders have. I'm scared I'll get someone killed. You will, probably. People die out here. It's just reality. But you'll also save people. You'll make hard choices and live with the consequences. Keep doing it because that's what leaders do. She smiled. Besides, you've got good people around you. Tom knows tactics. Calvin knows strategy. Vanessa knows medicine. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know who to ask. What about you? What did you know? I knew how to keep moving, how to not give up, even when everything seemed helpless. And I knew that as long as one person was still trying, there was still hope. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was weak, barely there. Promise me something, Marcus. Anything. Don't let them forget. Don't let them forget what the world was like before. The books, the music, the art, the ideas, all the things that made us human. This winter, survival was everything. But when spring comes and you start rebuilding, remember that humans need more than food and shelter. They need meaning. They need beauty. They need reasons to be alive. I promised. Good. She closed her eyes. Now get out of here. You've got work to do. Gloria Henderson died on March 12th at 3:47 in the afternoon, with Vanessa holding her hand. We buried her the next day in a clearing near the lake, under a pine tree that had survived the winter. Tom said some words about duty and sacrifice. Calvin talked about courage and leadership. I tried to speak but couldn't get past the lump in my throat. Jake stepped forward instead. Gloria saved my mom and me. He said, his voice clear in the cold air. She gave us hope when we didn't have any. She showed us that even when the world ends, people can still choose to be good. We're all here because of her. We're all alive because she chose not to give up. He placed a small wooden cross in the grave, something he'd carved himself, with her name and dates roughly etched into the wood. Others stepped forward and added things. A cigarette from one of the guards who'd shared smokes with her. A radio microphone from someone she'd rescued. A pressed flower that Patricia had saved from before the outbreak. When everyone had paid their respects, we walked back to the lodge in silence. I stood on the porch, and I looked at the 41 people gathered around me. Scared, grieving, but still here. Still trying. She's right, you know, Tom said quietly. You'll do fine. I don't feel fine. I feel terrified. Good. That means you understand the responsibility. He clapped me on the shoulder. Come on, we've got a community meeting to run. That night, I stood before everyone and accepted the role I'd been preparing for. I talked about Gloria's vision, about surviving winter and preparing for spring, about the challenges ahead and the need for everyone to contribute, about choosing hope over despair, community over isolation, building over just surviving. When I finished, Vanessa stood. All in favor of Marcus as our leader? Every hand went up. Then it's settled, Tom said. Marcus is in charge. God help us all. There was nervous laughter at that, which broke some of the tension. We spent the next hour discussing practical matters, food supplies, security improvements, plans for planting gardens. It felt surreal to be leading the meeting instead of assisting with it, but people listened and contributed and worked together. Later, I found Jake on the dock, looking at the lake. The ice was breaking up now, large chunks floating in the dark water. Spring's coming, he said. Yeah, I'm scared. Me too. He looked at me. But we're going to keep trying, right? That's what Gloria would want. I thought about David and his family, about all the people we'd lost and the ones we'd saved, about Gloria's last words, about not forgetting what made us human, about choosing to keep going even when it seemed impossible. Yeah, I said. We're going to keep trying. Spring came to northern New York with startling speed. By late March, the temperature was climbing into the 40s during the day. Snow melted in rushing torrents, and the lake transformed from solid ice to open water in less than a week. The woods around Timshell erupted in green, buds appearing on trees, grass pushing through the mud, the first flowers blooming in impossible colors after months of white and gray. It was beautiful. It was also terrifying. The infected thawed with the spring. The slow, frozen corpses we'd grown accustomed to became fast, aggressive hunters. They emerged from the woods in growing numbers, drawn by the signs of life at the lodge. We fought them off daily now, small groups at first, then larger ones. Tom organized a defensive perimeter, with cleared sight lines and firing positions. We dug trenches and built walls using logs and earth. It was exhausting work, but necessary. They're getting smarter, Calvin said during one of our planning meetings. Or at least more coordinated. Yesterday's group hit us from 3 sides simultaneously. It's not random. Maybe they're following each other, Vanessa suggested. Some kind of pack behavior. Or maybe the infection is evolving, I said. Learning. No one liked that possibility, but we couldn't ignore it. The gardens were our hope for the future. Patricia and Helen led teams to clear and till the soil behind the lodge. We planted seeds we'd scavenged from abandoned homes. Vegetables, herbs, even some grain. It would take months to produce food, But if we could survive that long, we might have a sustainable food source. The fishing was good. Mike and Chen took one of the resort's old boats out onto the lake and returned with strings of bass and pike. Fresh fish became a regular part of our diet, supplementing our dwindling stores of preserved food. Slowly, carefully, we were building something. But the infected kept coming. On April 3rd, we faced our biggest attack yet. Over 200 infected emerged from the woods at dawn, moving in a coordinated wave. We fought for 6 hours, shooting from the walls, falling back to secondary positions when they breached the perimeter, finally holding them at the lodge itself. We lost 2 people. Rodriguez was dragged over a wall by a group of infected and torn apart before we could save her. One of the Norwood survivors, a man named Peter, was bitten while defending the kitchen entrance. Tom shot him before he could turn. We burned the infected bodies in a massive pyre that sent black smoke into the spring sky. That night, we held a memorial service for Rodriguez and Peter, adding their names to a wooden board Tom had mounted in the dining hall, our memorial wall, listing everyone we'd lost. The list was getting long. "We can't keep this up," Tom said after the service. "We're burning through ammunition. People are exhausted. And sooner or later, our luck is going to run out." "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "We need to go on the offense. Stop waiting for them to attack and start clearing them out systematically. Create a safe zone around Timshell and push them back." "With what resources? We barely have enough ammunition to defend, let alone attack." Calvin cleared his throat. "There might be a way. Fort Drum." Everyone looked at him. "The base went dark months ago," I said. "You said it yourself. It's gone." I said the base went dark. I didn't say it was empty. The Army stores massive amounts of supplies on base. Weapons, ammunition, food, medical equipment. If we could get inside, even just raid the Armory. "That's suicide," Vanessa said. "If the base fell, it could have tens of thousands of infected inside. Or it could be locked down and empty. We don't know until we check." Calvin looked at me. "Marcus, it's a risk, but it might be our only chance to get the resources we need for long-term survival." I thought about it, about all the ways it could go wrong. But I also thought about dwindling supplies, our exhausted people, our uncertain future. How many people would we need? 10, maybe 12. Best fighters, best shots. Hit fast, get what we need, and get out. When? Soon, before the infected get more active. We've got maybe a 2-week window. I looked around at my leadership team. Tom, Calvin, Vanessa, Mike. Thoughts? "Risky but necessary," Tom said. "We need those supplies." "I agree," Mike added. "But we need to plan this carefully. One mistake and we lose our best people." Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Do it, but make sure you come back. All of you." I nodded. "All right, Calvin, you plan the mission. Tom, you help him pick the team. We go in 1 week, and I'm coming with you." "Marcus?" Tom started. "I'm coming," I repeated. "Gloria taught me that leaders don't ask people to take risks they wouldn't take themselves. This is my call, so I'm going." No one argued with that. We spent the next week preparing. Calvin studied maps of Fort Drum, identifying the armory and planning approach routes. Tom drove the strike team in tactics and coordination. Vanessa prepared medical supplies in case things went wrong. Jake found me the night before we were set to leave. "You really going?" "Yeah." "What if you don't come back?" I looked at this kid who'd become something like a little brother to me over the past months. "Then Tom takes over, and you help him the way you've been helping me. But I plan on coming back, Jake. I've got reasons to." "Like what?" "Like you. Like everyone here. Like the gardens we planted and the future we're trying to build." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Gloria told me something about before she died. She said humans need more than food and shelter. They need meaning and beauty and reasons to be alive. You're part of that reason, Jake. You and everyone else here. So yeah, I'm coming back." He hugged me suddenly, fiercely. I hugged him back. And for a moment, we were just two people trying to find comfort in a world that had taken everything from us. The next morning, 12 of us loaded into 3 vehicles and headed south toward Fort Drum. The base sat about 50 miles south of Timshell, near the city of Watertown. We approached cautiously, taking back roads and watching for infected. The countryside was green and alive, so different from the frozen wasteland it had been just months ago. Under other circumstances, it would have been beautiful. We saw our first signs of trouble 10 miles from the base. Abandoned vehicles or military vehicles blocked the road. Some of them burned out. We went around them carefully, weapons ready. Fort Drum appeared through the trees like a ghost city. The main gate was closed, but not locked. Someone had opened it and left it that way. We drove through slowly, scanning for threats. The base was massive, over 100,000 acres with hundreds of buildings. It had housed over 20,000 soldiers in its peak. Now it was silent, empty, dead. "Where is everyone?" Chen whispered. "That's what worries me," Calvin answered. We drove deeper into the base, following Calvin's directions toward the armory. The streets were empty, but showed signs of fighting. Bullet holes in buildings, blood stains on pavement, abandoned equipment. Whatever had happened here was violent. The army was a large concrete building surrounded by a fence. The gate was closed but unlocked. We stopped outside and studied the building. "Looks intact," Tom said through binoculars, "but there's no way to know what's inside." "Only one way to find out," Calvin said. We approached on foot, leaving 2 people with the vehicles. The armory door was secure with a keypad lock that should have required a code, but someone had shot the lock out recently, judging by the damage. Calvin pushed the door open slowly. Inside was darkness. We entered with flashlights and weapons, moving in tactical formation. The entrance hall was empty. So was the first storage room. But in the second room, we found what we came for. Weapons, hundreds of them, still in their racks. Crates of ammunition stacked floor to ceiling. Medical supplies. MREs by the thousands. Body armor. Communications equipment. Everything we needed and more. "Jackpot," Tom breathed. "Too easy," I said. "Why wasn't this looted?" "Who cares?" one of the others said. "Let's load it up and get out." We started carrying supplies to the vehicles. On our third trip, I found the answer to my question. There was a door at the back of the armory marked basement. It was barred from the outside, heavy steel bars welded across it, and from behind it, I could hear sounds. Moaning, scratching, the unmistakable sounds of infected. "Calvin," I called quietly. "You need to see this." He came over, followed by Tom. They heard it too. The sounds of dozens, maybe hundreds of infected locked in the basement below us. "Someone trapped them down there," Calvin said. "Sealed them in before they evacuated." "Which means they knew the base was compromised," Tom added. "They locked up the infected and left." "Where did they go?" I asked. A voice answered from behind us. "They went south, or tried to." We spun around, weapons up. A man stood in the doorway, white, maybe 60, wearing tattered army fatigues with colonel's insignia. He was thin to the point of emaciation, his face haggard, but his eyes were sharp and aware. He held no weapon. "Who are you?" Calvin demanded. "Colonel Marcus Winters, U.S. Army, formerly the commanding officer of this installation." He looked around at the armory. "Come to loot the place, have you? Can't say I blame you. It's not doing anyone any good sitting here." "What happened here?" I asked, lowering my rifle slightly. "Where did everybody go?" Winters laughed bitterly. "Evacuated. Orders came from Washington in February. Abandoned northern New York. Fall back to defensive lines in Pennsylvania. The brass decided this whole region was lost. Too spread out. Too many infected. Too damn cold. So they loaded out whatever they could carry and left." "And you stayed?" "Someone had to. We had over 300 infected in the basement. Soldiers who'd turned. Civilians who sought shelter here. I couldn't just leave them to starve or freeze. So I locked them in, and I stayed to make sure they didn't get out." He gestured vaguely at the building. "Been here for 2 months, running out of food, running out of reasons. But the job's not done yet." Tom studied him. You've been here alone for 2 months, guarding infected in the basement? That's right. Why? I asked. What's the point? Winters looked at me with those sharp, tired eyes. Because someone has to do the right thing, even when nobody's watching. Those people down there, they were soldiers under my command. They deserve better than to be forgotten. He paused. Besides, if I left and they somehow got out, they'd spread across the countryside. Last thing you survivors need is 300 more infected roaming around. Calvin and I exchanged glances. There are 41 of us, I said, up at Cranberry Lake. We've been surviving the winter, trying to build something. Winter's expression shifted. Surprise. Then something like hope. 41. That's more than I expected. The evacuation order said this region was completely lost. It's not lost, I said. We're still here. He nodded slowly. Then I suppose my job really is done. He looked at the barred door. I've been thinking about how to end this. Can't leave them locked up forever. Can't risk setting them free. That leaves one option. What option? Tom asked. Burn it. Burn the whole building with them inside. Make sure they can't hurt anyone else. He looked at us. But I need help. The building won't burn easily. Too much concrete. We'd need accelerant, multiple ignition points, and someone to make sure it's done right. You're talking about cremating 300 people? Vanessa said, her voice strained. I'm talking about destroying 300 infected before they harm anyone else, Winters corrected. They stopped being people months ago. I thought about Professor Richardson, about Amy Chen, about David and his family, about all the impossible choices this new world forced on us. We'll help, I said. But first, we load our vehicles. We need these supplies. Winters nodded. Fair enough. Take what you need. When you're done, we'll finish this. It took us 3 hours to load the vehicles. We took weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, and food. As much as we could carry. The whole time, I could hear the infected below us, trapped in their concrete tomb, waiting. When we were finished, Winters led us to the armory, showing us where to place charges and accelerant. He'd clearly been planning this for a while. He had diesel fuel stored in drums, explosives from the base arsenal, everything we needed. When it goes up, it'll be visible for miles, he warned. Every infected in the area will be drawn here. You'll want to be long gone before that happens. What about you? I asked. What about me? Come with us, to Timshell. We could use someone with military experience, and you're more than done your duty here. Winters looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at the barred door, at the building around us. No, this is where I need to be. These people were my responsibility. I need to see this through. You'll die, Vanessa said. Probably, but I'll die before doing what's right. He smiled sadly. Besides, I'm tired. So goddamn tired. This feels like a good place to stop. I wanted to argue, but I understood. Some people needed to see their mission through to the end, no matter the cost. Gloria had been like that. Maybe I was becoming like that too. Thank you, I said finally, for staying, for doing what needed to be done. Winter shook my hand. Take care of those 41 people. Build something worth surviving for. We will. We left him there, setting his charges and preparing for the end. As we drove away from Fort Drum, I looked back and saw him standing in the doorway of the armory, a lone figure against the setting sun. The explosion came 15 minutes later, a massive fireball that rose into the sky, visible for miles. We felt it more than heard it, a deep concussive thump that shook the vehicles. He did it, Calvin said quietly. We drove in silence for a while. Then Chen spoke up from the back seat. He was right, you know. Someone has to do the right thing, even when no one's watching. That's what makes us different from them. Yeah, I said. It is. We reached Timshell after dark, exhausted but alive. People pouring out of the lodge as we pulled up, excited to see what we brought. We unloaded supplies while I filled Tom in on everything that had happened. Jake found me while I was carrying ammunition into the storage room, You made it back. Told you I would. What happened? You look different. I thought about Colonel Winters, standing alone in the armory, choosing duty over survival. About Rodriguez and Peter trying to protect the rest of us. About Gloria spending her last months making sure we had a future. I met someone who reminded me of what we're fighting for, I said. Not just survival, but the idea that humans can still be good, can still do the right thing, even when the world's ending. Jake considered this. That's what Gloria said, about choosing to be good. Yeah, it is. That night, we held a celebration of sorts, with the supplies from Fort Drum. We had enough ammunition for months, enough food to supplement our gardens, enough medical equipment for Vanessa to actually save lives. For the first time since the outbreak began, we had real hope for the future. I stood on the dock watching the sun set over Cranberry Lake. The water was calm, reflecting the orange and purple sky. Spring was in full bloom now. Trees green, flowers blooming, birds singing. The world was coming back to life. The infected were still out there, still a threat. We'd faced more attacks, more losses, more impossible choices. But we'd also have this, a community of 41 people, 40 now, after Rodriguez and Peter, who had chosen to survive together, to build together, to be more than just scared animals hiding from monsters. Tom joined me on the dock. You did good out there, Marcus. The supply run, bringing back all the equipment, Gloria would be proud. I hope so. What's next? I thought about it. About the gardens growing behind the lodge. About the children learning to read with Helen. About Vanessa training more medics. About all the small acts of building and creating and hoping. Next, we live. I said, we defend what we built. We grow food. We teach the kids. We remember what it means to be human. And when fall comes and winter returns, we'll be ready. You think we can make it? Long term? I looked back at the lodge, warm and lit from within, full of people who'd become something like family. I thought about everything we'd survived, everything we'd built, everything we'd chosen despite the odds. Yeah, I said, I think we can. The attack came 3 days later at dawn. We were ready for it this time. Tom and Calvin had established a perimeter watch system, and the guards spotted the infected while they were still a quarter mile away. There were at least 300 of them, emerging from the woods in a coordinated wave that definitely was not random. Everyone to positions, Tom's voice echoed through the lodge. We'd drill for this. Everyone knew their role, their position, their fallback points. The fighters grabbed weapons and moved to the walls. The non-combatants secured the lodge and prepared backup positions. Helen took the children to the upper floor safe room we constructed. I took my position on the wall next to Tom. Calvin on my other side. The infected approached steadily, and I could see them more clearly now. Hundreds of gray, shambling figures, all moving with purpose toward our position. Hold fire until they're in range, Tom commanded. Make every shot count. The infected reached out our cleared kill zone, the area we'd stripped of cover and obstacles. Tom gave the order. Fire! The battle lasted 4 hours. Wave after wave of infected crashed against our defenses. We fought from the walls until they were overrun, then fell back to the secondary positions. When those were breached, we retreated into the lodge itself, fighting room by room. I lost count of how many I killed. My rifle overheated from the sustained fire. I switched to my pistol, then to Mike's shotgun when that ran dry. Around me, people fought with everything they had. Rifles, pistols, axes, even sharpened poles when ammunition ran out. Chen died holding the kitchen entrance, buying time for the others to evacuate to the upper floors. One of the Norfolk teachers, Sarah, who taught Jake, was pulled through a broken window before anyone could save her. Steve took a bite to the shoulder, and Tom shot him before he could turn. But we held. As the sun climbed toward noon, the infected assault finally broke. The remaining ones, maybe 50 out of the 100 that attacked, retreated into the woods. We'd won, but at terrible cost. We'd lost 9 people, 9 more names for the memorial wall. That night, exhausted and grieving, We gathered in the dining hall. I stood before everyone, looking at the 31 survivors who remained, blood-stained, exhausted, traumatized, but alive. I know you're tired, I said. I know you're scared. I know you're wondering if this is worth it. All the fighting, all the loss, all the struggle. And I can't answer that for you. Everyone has to make their own choice about whether to keep going. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But I can tell you what I choose. I choose to believe that we can make it, that these gardens we planted will grow, that these children we're teaching will have a future, that this community we're building will survive and thrive and become something worth all the sacrifice it's cost. I looked at Jake, at Vanessa, at Tom and Calvin and Mike, at Patricia and Helen and all the others who'd fought and bled and refused to give up. Gloria taught me a word, I continued. Timshel, it means thou mayest. It means we have the power to choose who we are and what we do, even in the worst circumstances, especially in the worst circumstances. Every day, we choose to survive. Every day, we choose to help each other. Every day, we choose to be human instead of just surviving. I held up a glass of water. We'd run out of anything better months ago. So I'm choosing to keep going. I'm choosing to believe that spring means rebirth, not just for the infected, but for us. I'm choosing to build something that lasts, and asking all of you to make that choice with me. To Timchel, Tom said, raising his glass. To Gloria, Vanessa added. To everyone we've lost, Jake said quietly, and everyone we saved. To the future, Calvin finished. We drank together, survivors in a world that had tried to kill us, choosing to live anyway. Spring turned to summer. The gardens grew, producing food that supplemented our hunting and fishing. We expanded them, planting more, learning what worked in northern New York's short growing season. Patricia became an expert in preservation, smoking meat, pickling vegetables, preparing for the next winter. The infected attacks continued, but became more manageable. We learned their patterns, anticipated their movements, and defended our territory effectively. The supplies from Fort Drum gave us the ammunition we needed to hold them off. We sent our salvage teams to nearby towns, gathering supplies and equipment. We found solar panels and got them working with Mike's help. We recovered books from libraries and started building our own collection. Helen's school grew from 3 children to 5 when we found 2 more survivors hiding in the woods. By August, we had 40 people again. New survivors we'd found, or who had found us through radio broadcasts we started making. A family of 4 from Ogdensburg, 3 college students who'd survived in a campus building, a park ranger who'd been alone in a fire tower for months. Each new arrival brought skills, knowledge, and stories. Each one was another choice to keep making, trying, keep building, keep hoping. I found myself settling in to leadership. It wasn't natural. I still felt like a literature professor pretending to know what he was talking about. But people listened and contributed and worked together. Tom and Calvin handled military matters. Vanessa managed health and medicine. Patricia ran logistics. I coordinated between them, solved disputes, and tried to think about long-term future. Jake became my indispensable right hand. At 13 now, he'd grown 3 inches and had a maturity far beyond his years. He managed schedules, tracked supplies, and spotted problems before they became crises. His nightmares had lessened, though they never completely went away. He was learning to carry his trauma, to function despite it. One evening in late August, I stood on the dock watching the sunset. The air was warm, insects buzzed over the water, and somewhere in the lodge behind me, someone was playing a guitar, an instrument we'd salvaged from a music store in Canton. The music drifted across the water, the first music I'd heard in months. Vanessa joined me. Beautiful, isn't it? The sunset, the music, all of it. Yeah, I agreed. It is. We're going to make it, Marcus. Not just survive, really make it. You think so? I know so. We've got food, growing, people learning, systems at work. We've lost people. God knows we've lost so many people. But we're still here, and we're still building. I thought about David and Jessica, about Emma and Liam, about Gloria and Rodriguez and Colonel Winters. about all the people who hadn't made it to see the sunset. Do you think they'd be proud? I asked quietly. The ones we lost? Vanessa considered this. I think they'd be grateful. We're living for them, in a way, keeping their memory alive by refusing to give up. The guitar music continued, joined now by voices singing. One of the college kids had a good voice, and others were learning a song. It was rough and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. What do you miss most? Vanessa asked. From before. Coffee, I said immediately, and she laughed. Real coffee, not the burnt chicory root substitute Patricia makes. What about you? My sister. She lived in California. We used to talk every Sunday night, just checking in, sharing our weeks. Vanessa's voice was soft. I'll never know what happened to her. If she's alive somewhere, if she made it. That's the worst part, not knowing. We stood in comfortable silence, listening to the music and the water. Marcus, Vanessa finally said. Thank you. For what? For getting us here. For making this place what it is. Gloria chose right when she picked you. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. The summer passed into fall, and fall into winter again. The second winter was easier than the first. We had better supplies, better defenses, better knowledge. The infected slowed in the cold, and we used the quiet months to repair, rebuild, and plan. By the time spring returned again, the second spring since the outbreak, we had grown to 53 people. We built 2 more cabins to house everyone. The gardens had tripled in size. We had a working school, a functioning medical bay, a communication systems that connected to 3 other survivor communities in upstate New York. We had lost people along the way, to injuries, to illness, to infected attacks. The memorial wall was longer now, covered in names. But we'd also gained people, saved people, given them hope and purpose. On the anniversary of Gloria's death, March 12th, 1 year later, we held a ceremony at her grave. Everyone gathered on the pine tree, and I spoke about her legacy, about the community she'd helped build, about the choice she'd made to keep them even from when she was dying. Jake placed fresh flowers in the grave, wildflowers she'd found growing near the lake. Thank you, he said simply, for everything. As we walked back to the lodge, Tom fell into step beside me. You know what's remarkable? What? A year ago, we had 42 people and we were just trying to survive the spring thaw. Now we have 53 people and we're planning for the future. That's growth, Marcus. Real growth. We've lost people too, I reminded him. But we have. But the trend is always upward. More people joining than dying. That means something. It did mean something. It meant we were winning, slowly and painfully, but winning. That night, I sat in the office that had been Gloria's, that I'd inherited along with her responsibilities. Maps covered the walls, showing our territory. A radio crackled softly in the corner, monitoring the channels we'd established with other survivor groups. Jake knocked on the doorframe. You wanted to see me? Yeah, come in, sit down. He sat, looking curious and slightly worried. At 14 now, he was almost as tall as me, his red hair longer than it had been, his face losing the last traces of childhood. I've been thinking about the future, I said, about what happens next to Tim Shell, for all of us. And I've been thinking about leadership, about succession planning. Succession? What happens if something happens to me? Who takes over? Who keeps this place running? I leaned forward. Tom and Calvin will handle military decisions. Vanessa handles medical. Patricia handles logistics. But we need someone who can coordinate between them, who can see the big picture and think long term. Someone smart, organized, and trusted. Jake's eyes widened. You mean me? Eventually. You're too young now. But in a few years, you'd be ready. You already do half the job anyway. The scheduling, the supply tracking, the problem solving. You just need to learn the people management side of things. I don't know if I can. I didn't know if I could either, I interrupted. None of us did. But we chose to try anyway. That's what Tim Shell means, remember? Thou mayest. You have the power to choose. He was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Then he said, Okay, I'll try. Good, because I'm not planning on going anywhere, but it's good to know someone's ready if needed. Jake stood to leave, then paused at the door. Marcus? Thanks for believing in me, for not treating me like the traumatized kid who'd killed his dad. You're not that kid anymore, I said. You're someone who survived hell and chose to become someone good anyway. That's who you are. After he left, I sat in the quiet office, listening to the sounds of the lodge around me. People talking, moving, living. 53 people who had all made the choice to keep going, to keep building, to keep hoping. Outside, spring was in full bloom again, the second spring, and we were still here. I thought about everything we'd survived. The frozen winter, the attacks, the losses, the impossible choices. I thought about David and Gloria and all the others who'd made it out. And I thought about the future we were building. One day at a time, one choice at a time. Tim shall, I thought. Thou mayest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow the infected might attack again. Tomorrow we might lose more people. But tomorrow we could also plant seeds, teach children, heal the sick, and build something worth surviving for. Tomorrow we would choose to live. And that choice, that simple, profound choice to keep trying despite everything, that was what made us human. That was what would separate us from the frozen dead. We would survive this. Not just survive, but build something new from the ashes of the old world. Something better. Maybe. Something that remembered both the mistakes and the triumphs of what came before. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at Tim Shell. Our community. Our home. Our future. The gardens were green, with growing plants. The cabins showed warm lights. People moved between buildings, going about their evening routines. It wasn't much, not compared to what the world had been, but it was ours, and it was enough. I turned off the office light and went to join the others for dinner, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. Because that's what we did now. We faced tomorrow, together, and we kept choosing to live. Epilogue. 5 years later, Tim Shell had grown to 143 people. The community spread across the resort property and into the surrounding woods. We'd built new cabins, established a working farm, and created systems that actually worked. The children, 12 of them now, attended school every day with Helen and 2 other teachers. Vanessa's medical clinic had real equipment and trained assistants. We had electricity from solar and hydroelectric power. We had food security. We had hope. The infected were still out there. They always would be, but their numbers had thinned over the years. Exposure, starvation, our systematic clearing operations, they were a manageable threat now, not an existential one. I stood on the dock of a warm summer evening, Jake beside me. He was 19 now, tall and confident, serving as my deputy and learning leadership the way I'd learned from Gloria. The council meeting is in an hour, he reminded me. We need to discuss the proposal from the Syracuse community. They want to establish a trade route. I know. Thanks for the reminder. I looked at him. You ready to lead that meeting? I think it's time you started taking more of these. He looked surprised, then thoughtful. Yeah, I think I am. Good, because I'm getting old, and someone needs to be ready to take over. Jake laughed. You're 38, Marcus. It's not old. It feels old some days. We stood together, watching the sun set over the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the orange sky. Birds called from the trees. Somewhere behind us, someone was playing music. We had a whole band now. People who'd rediscovered instruments and the joy of creating something beautiful. Do you think about them? Jake asked quietly. The ones who didn't make it? Every day, I admitted. David and his family, Gloria, Rodriguez, all of them. But I also think about what we built here, about how we chose to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. That's their legacy. Not the way they died, but what they did because they lived. Tim shall, Jake said. Tim shall, I agreed. Thou mayest. We choose to survive. We chose to build. We chose to hope. And look what we created. I gestured at the community around us. The buildings, the gardens, the people moving through the evening, alive and purposeful. It wasn't the old world. It would never be the old world. But it was something new. Something we'd built together from the frozen ashes of civilization. Come on, I said to Jake. We've got work to do. We walked back to the lodge together, ready to face the future. Ready to keep pushing. Ready to keep building. Because that's what we did. We survived. We built. We hoped. And we never, ever stopped choosing to live. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. This is the completion of this story arc. I like to throw these little epilogues in so that so there's closure, you know? I mean, I guess you could keep going with the story indefinitely, but I think we had a nice arc for Marcus. You know, he started out as a scared guy, ended up as the leader of this big group, and I enjoyed reading it, so I hope you guys really enjoyed listening to it. Come back next time for some more scary stories, and as always, remember to face your fears.